Chapter 499. In the darkness, a flame suddenly rose. The wildly dancing flames continuously dispelled the surrounding darkness and illuminated the space that was covered by darkness. In an instant, the dome above her head was suffused with traces of blood-like red light. As it lit up, it flowed wantonly in all directions. The blood-colored flowing light vibrated like veins and spread everywhere like flowing water. In just a few breaths, the huge arc-shaped dome was completely occupied by the blood-colored flowing light. At this moment, the light suddenly lit up. It was as if a sun had risen in the darkness, revealing all the world covered by darkness in front of Lamia's eyes. The abyss. Without hesitation or doubt, when the light lit up, Lamia saw the scenery hidden behind the light. It was a chaotic world mixed with blood and fire, life and death. There was no sound, no color. There was only the final remnant of the wails that kept coming from the cracks of the world that were constantly twisting and shattering. There was also the remnant resentment of the civilization that was unwilling to be swallowed by the abyss and eventually fell into the end of destruction. There was also the regret of giving everything but ultimately failing to save the people they loved and the civilization they loved from the abyss. All of this converged to form the door that she saw before stepping into the abyss. A door formed by the remnant sounds of countless civilizations that were destroyed by the abyss over a long period of time. Unwillingness, resentment, anger. Is this the dome of the Parliament of Destiny? Lamia stopped and looked at the door that gradually revealed its true appearance as the light faded. It's spectacular, isn't it? Miss Lamia. This is the foundation of the Parliament of Destiny. The clown mask standing behind Lamia laughed. The dull and crazy laughter penetrated the mask and echoed under the dome for a long time. Door, the door that wanders in the abyss. This is the remnant sound of civilization, but also the miserable howl of civilization when it comes to its end. To us, this is undoubtedly the best reward. As soon as the voice that appeared out of nowhere sounded, Mr. J's laughter stopped abruptly. A cold gaze shot out from under the mask and pierced straight into the darkness not far away. Ah, don't be so excited, Mr. J. Although we haven't seen each other for a while. But I don't like this kind of intense reminiscing. Mr. Have you completed all the tasks given to you by the chairman? You should know that it has only been half a year since you accepted the mission. Amidst the chilling murderous aura, the clown mask quietly twisted and changed its shape. From the original clown mask with tears in his smile, it quietly turned into a terrifying, ferocious, and terrifying mask. Humph! A burst of complacent laughter came from a dark corner, but Lamia, who was watching from the sidelines, was still unable to discover the person hiding in the shadows. It's just a small world. You don't need Mr. J to worry about you. Furthermore, when the mission was completed, I left a gift for the pack of hounds. Mr. J, I'm afraid you'll be targeted by those hounds for some time to come. What? The pattern on the clown mask distorted. Obviously, Mr. J already knew what the person hiding in the shadows had done. Mr. No one knew his real name. They only knew that before he joined the Destiny Council, he was once called Assassin. Other than that, they only knew that at a certain time, the person who was once called Assassin could disguise himself as someone else through some means. Moreover, his disguise skills were so superb that even the person he disguised himself as could not detect any flaws. In other words, without Mr. J's knowledge, Mr. A had used his appearance to destroy a world and left behind obvious clues to attract the attention of the hounds controlled by the Space Administration. Mr. A, how dare you disobey the chairman's order? You should know that you're responsible for that world. Why did you disguise yourself as me? Mr. J raised his right hand and pressed it down, and several cold lights shot out from his hand. The cold lights broke through the darkness in the blink of an eye and went straight to the person protected by the darkness. However, Mr. J's angry attack was destined to fail. Stop! Above the dome, a cold roar suddenly descended, and Mr. J, as well as Mr. A, who was hiding in the shadows, were violently pressed to the ground. Mr. A also fell out of the shadows and lay on the ground, trembling in fear. "Please forgive my rudeness, Mr. Chairman." Mr. J knelt on the ground and begged for mercy with a trembling voice. Mr. J, Mr. A, the Destiny Council forbids any attack on any member and all allies who help us. Now go and reflect on your actions. Crack! With a dull thud, 2 holes suddenly appeared under Mr. J and Mr. A's feet. Before the two could react, they were swallowed by the hole. Lamia, who was standing next to them, silently watched as the hole swallowed the two and disappeared completely. The ground became smooth and transparent again, and for a moment she was silent. However, the voice that came from above the dome had no intention of letting her go. "Sorry, Miss Lamia. We didn't mean to let you see the ugliness between our members. Believe me, this is just an accident. I promise you that the same situation will not happen again in the future." As the thunderous voice rolled in the air, Lamia also put away some of her scattered thoughts and looked up at the door, the dome with the image of the abyss. "Presumably, you are the chairman of the Destiny Council, right?" "Yes, dear Miss Lamia. Please forgive me for not being able to meet you in person now." "Why? I don't think a council led by a chairman who can't meet me is worthy of my joining." Lamia's gaze gradually became cold and fierce, as if she wanted to see through the person called the chairman hidden behind the abyss. However, before the person hidden behind the abyss spoke, another unfamiliar voice sounded. "Yes. What value does a guy who hides his head and shows his tail have to let us join his Destiny Council?" Lamia looked back and saw a young man dressed in a luxurious white robe with a gorgeous and solemn crown on his head. His eyes had a mysterious and strange purple light flowing through them. He was standing not far behind her. Like Lamia, he raised his head and looked behind the abyss. "Mr. K. You succeeded?" A surprised voice came from above the dome. Lamia couldn't help but curiously size up this young man who had appeared behind her at some point in time. "Sorry for worrying the chairman. Thanks to your blessings, I have successfully walked out of that path that had no end." The man in the white robe bowed slightly and showed a confident smile. "Is that so? That's great, Mr. K." In addition to being surprised, the chairman's voice also had a trace of relief. "Thank you for worrying." After the man in the white robe thanked him again, his tone suddenly changed and became sharp. "Chairman, as I said just now, a council led by a person who hides his head and shows his tail has no value for us to join." The repeated words made the president fall silent. Presumably, the words of the man in the white robe had made the chairman feel embarrassed. Yes. Throughout the long years, there had been countless people who had stepped onto that endless path in an attempt to find the end point hidden in the depths of endless despair. However, the result was that one person after another fell on the path, and in the end, a terrifying plane formed from bones was formed. And now, the man who was called Mr. K had found the end point that should only exist in legends. After weighing the pros and cons, the chairman finally made what he thought was the most correct decision. "Sorry, Mr. K, Miss Lamia. Now, my body can't come to meet you in person. Therefore, the only thing I can do is to meet you in the form of a mass projection at this moment." Lamia kept quiet about these words, which were obviously a show of goodwill, and just waited for the man in the white robe who had walked to her side to speak. "Very good, Chairman. That's enough." The man in the white robe smiled slightly and looked at the mass projection that was gradually taking shape as it was projected from the abyss above the dome. Once again, he thanked and bowed. "Thank you for your understanding, Mr. K." It was a sharp gaze hidden under the sword-like eyebrows, a square face, graying sideburns, but a ruddy face. Was this the true face of the legendary chairman of the Parliament of Destiny? As this thought surfaced in Lamia's mind, she was also stared at by the chairman. "Miss Lamia, how is your physical condition?" In order to heal your injuries, we have already done everything we can to treat you. Yes. Thank you for your concern. Now, except for the old illness, my body is all right. Lamia nodded slightly to express her gratitude for the chairman's concern. Yes. Although I would like to talk to you, the changes in the battle situation have made me powerless. Mr. K, Mr. Lamia, I hope we will have a chance to meet in 3 days. At that time, I will meet you in person. Yes. Then I will wait for the good news from the chairman. In addition, I wish the chairman a victory. Mr. K made a statement on the spot. It seemed that he had already known the situation the chairman was facing, and used this to put pressure on the chairman to make him express his stance. In that case, goodbye. The mass projection that had just been cast did not last for a few minutes before it once again turned into a stream of light and disappeared above the dome. He left? Lamia looked at the stream of light that disappeared, but there were more doubts in her heart that could not be solved. Miss Lamia, what is your decision? The white-robed man turned to look at Lamia. Have you decided? Lamia pondered for a moment and nodded. Now I have no way out. So, I will join the Parliament of Destiny. Welcome Miss Lamia to the Parliament of Destiny. I am Mr. K. The white-robed man gladly made a welcoming gesture, but he concealed his real name. Mr. K. His real name was Lucio Lamperugi. He was also the white-robed man who had resolutely stepped on the ladder of 7 words, under the gaze of C.C. and Dr. Zasali, and finally stepped out of the ladder of 7 words, and stood here, facing the chairman of the Parliament of Destiny. However, before the first wave subsided, another wave arose. When the projection of the chairman dissipated and Lucio welcomed Lamia, 2 more figures appeared in the darkness. The chairman's aura disappeared. Is it over? Are we late? When the voice came, 2 tall women, who also wore the same uniform but had different hair colors, walked out of the darkness and stood in front of Lucio and Lamia. The leader was a woman with long emerald green hair and a rose pendant around her neck. Behind her was a young girl with long pink hair and a dignified and elegant demeanor. Mr. K, is that you? Why do I feel like your appearance has changed? The woman with long emerald green hair was slightly taken aback when she saw Lucio. Looking at the woman in front of him, a memory that was silent in Lucio's mind quietly awakened. This was the memory of the emperor who was killed by Lucio. After his death, along with the power that flowed into Lucio's body, these memories also became a part of Lucio. Miss, long time no see. It seems that you should have found your partner. Lucio's gaze passed by the woman he called Miss and fell on the dignified young girl. From her body, Lucio seemed to feel a trace of inexplicable abnormality that he could not explain. Yes, Mr. K. This is my partner, Mia. Under Miss E's introduction, the girl with long pink hair moved lightly, presented herself in front of Mr. K, and saluted him. Mr. K, I'm Mia. I'm Miss E's new partner. Very good partner, Miss E. It seems that your plan is going well. Lucio nodded slightly. After praising her, he directed the topic to Miss In. The plan is going well. Originally, I wanted to explain to the speaker before harvesting the fruit, but I didn't expect to miss the time to meet with the speaker. Miss E first nodded, then regretfully looked up at the abyss on the dome. There will be a chance in the future. That's right. This is our new member, Miss Lamia. Lucio nodded slightly, then turned Miss E's attention to Lamia. Nice to meet you. My name is Lamia, from now on, please. Lamia was just about to introduce herself, but unexpectedly, that stubborn old illness of hers flared up again. And? Miss E looked at Lamia suspiciously. No. I'm very sorry. I'm Lamia, please take care of me from now on. After quickly finishing this sentence, Lamia breathed a sigh of relief. He was afraid that his stubborn old illness would cause some trouble again. Hello. I'm Miss E. The communication between women was unusually smooth. But Lu Lucio looked at the abyss on the dome. Your Excellency, please take care. The strength of the pioneers is far beyond our imagination. Chapter 500. Between illusion and reality, there were two figures standing in the space that was filled with the wails of death. They had been here since some time ago. They had never left or moved forward. They just stood there quietly and stared at the person standing in front of them. Perhaps, at this moment, a long time had passed. Or perhaps, at this moment, time had just begun. It was as if in this space, all the time and space that all life could sense had turned into endless chaos. It never moved or existed. All of a sudden, two even larger figures appeared in the chaos without any warning. One was gold. One was black. They were all standing behind the two figures. Forerunners, do you really want to be enemies with us? The giant black figure stood behind them. That person took the lead to attack the person in front of him, the person protected by the giant golden figure. You're really naive. I didn't expect that after dying so many times at my hands, your brain didn't grow much. Under the golden figure, the figure called the Forerunner sneered. Humph. I only respected the first successor in history to inherit the prophet's legacy. I didn't expect you to look down on me. Under the black figure, a counterattack was followed by a sneer. Say no more, Phoenix. With a cold shout, the giant golden figure stretched and opened. Dozens of golden streams of light soared into the sky, stirring up a golden storm as they went straight for the giant black figure in front of them. Moreover, wherever the golden storm passed, the terrifying space between illusion and reality, filled with the wails of the civilization that was destroyed by the abyss at every moment, melted as quickly as ice and snow exposed to the blazing flames. In just the blink of an eye, the golden storm stirred up by the golden figure called Phoenix rushed in front of the black figure. At the same time, it locked down the space in all directions, leaving no gap for the black figure to escape. Faced with this situation, the black figure did not resist. It was as if he had accepted the reality that he was about to face and the fact that he was about to step into death. Under the golden storm, whether it was the distorted reality, the abyss of space, or the wails of the civilization that was unwilling to be destroyed, everything turned into nothingness. The original appearance of the space that they had occupied for a long time once again appeared in this world. It still doesn't work. As expected of a Forerunner. Originally, I thought that I would be able to reach the Forerunner realm. But I never thought that I was just a pitiful frog at the bottom of a well. This time, forgive me for taking my leave. Raising its head to look at the golden storm that was rolling over its head, the black shadow immediately fell apart, no longer having the huge body from before. Meanwhile, the figure under its protection calmly welcomed the arrival of his own death. The golden storm passed in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only a vast space that had once again returned to darkness. However, in that deep darkness, bursts of light that seemed to be breathing quietly lit up in a vast space. Lord Forerunner, please reply if you got it. With the departure of the howling abyss, the space gradually became lively. In the blink of an eye, it was flooded with all kinds of radio waves from different civilizations. Got it. I'm done here. How's the situation over there? With just a thought in his mind, the person who called the Forerunner immediately received a response. Yes, Lord Forerunner. Progress had been made on the battlefront. The First and Third Fleets have broken through the enemy's defensive line and are now taking over the enemy's core area as planned. The situation developed as expected. Or rather, the Forerunner's enemy once again chose to die under the Forerunner's unexpected gaze. What a troublesome guy! No matter how many times he is killed, he will always appear in front of you again. Is that all the President of the Destiny Council can do? While thinking, a cold female voice quietly sounded. No. That guy just doesn't want me to see through his strength. The pioneer turned around and saw a woman with blonde hair tied up. She was dressed in a long black dress. She looked cold and proud as she stood there, waiting for him. If you're here, what about the First Fleet? The enemy's defensive line has been lost. Even if I stay there are no enemies worthy of me making a move. So I'm here. When the cold woman's gaze met the Forerunners, it instantly melted and became as gentle as water. Is that so? I'm done here too. Let's go back. Okay. However, after taking a few steps, the Forerunner stopped in his track. Oh right. That piece of pistol has been sent out? Yes. It's already been sent to that person. Well then, let's wait and see. Star Glory City. Ray Minkai, who took the unknown chip from Invincible East, returned to the Space Administration. Ray Minkai, who originally wanted to visit Euphemia, did not expect to see a familiar figure standing at the door the moment he stepped into the Space Administration, waiting for his return. Pink long hair softly draped over her shoulders, a white dress embroidered with the Britannia royal family's patterns on the collar and cuffs, sparkling under the light. The face that should still be in a coma was now smiling sweetly. Kai, welcome back. The figure that greeted Ray Minkai gently called out Ray Minkai's name. UFFI. With a big stride, Ray Minkai hugged Euphemia into his arms. You're awake. Yes. It's all thanks to Himimi's singing. Euphemia listened to Ray Minkai's heartbeat and said softly. However, this warmth was destined to not last. Ahem. You two have to pay attention to the situation. This is the administration's hall. When Mimi's voice came, Ray Minkai and Euphemia realized that they were in the administration's hall. At this time, the administration's hall, which was usually bustling with people, was quiet. No matter which race, they consciously stopped and distanced themselves, leaving as much space as possible for Ray Minkai and Euphemia. Okay. Thank you, City Lord. At this time, Euphemia had turned into a shy girl, burying her head in Ray Minkai's arms. Therefore, only Ray Minkai could thank Himimi. However, Ray Minkai used the wrong name. Himimi waved her hand, indicating that the people around her didn't need to pay attention to the situation here, and walked in front of Ray Minkai. Didn't I say it before? I'm just holding the position of City Lord. Don't mind the name too much. Also, you can call me by my name like before. Okay. I was rude. Himimi. Ray Minkai nodded in agreement. Himimi furrowed her brows. How did you become a stubborn old knight now? Did Grandpa say something to you? No. The Venerable One didn't say anything to me. I just sincerely thank Himimi for your help. Before Ray Minkai finished speaking, Himimi showed a look of disdain. Forget it. That's it. Her Majesty Euphemia's condition has stabilized. You can go back. The familiar palace. The familiar crowd. After leaving the Space Administration, Ray Minkai and Euphemia finally returned to their world, standing on the land of the Britannia Empire. Solemn music resounded over the capital. Knights wearing the uniform of the Knights of the Royal Guard drove the Lionheart Knight on both sides of the road, showing the highest etiquette of the Empire to welcome the return of the king for their king, and also for the Knight Captain who led them. Behind the Lionheart Knight, there were people in bright clothes and excited expressions. Every time they made eye contact with Euphemia, the people shouted the name of their king frantically. At the end of the road, Cornelia stood there with everyone, waiting for the return of Euphemia and Ray Minkai. And on their left, there were people like Isolum and Ram who came to the Britannia Empire first. Welcome back, Your Majesty. Without any superfluous words, when Euphemia and Ray Minkai walked 10 meters in front of them, Cornelia led everyone to kneel down on the spot. Get up, Sister Royal. This time, I made the decision on my own. Thank you for your hard work. Euphemia quickly stepped forward and helped Cornelia up. No, this is what I should do. Cornelia just finished speaking, then turned to Ray Minkai. Knight Captain, although this is your mission, please don't involve Her Majesty in it. The Britannia Empire can't afford to lose another king. Ray Minkai was silent. This was a fact that Ray Minkai couldn't refute. However, Euphemia's accident was also something he could not have predicted. Sister Royal, please don't blame Kai. This is my own decision. Also, if an accident can be predicted in advance, then it's not an accident. Euphemia defended Ray Minkai on the spot. In the face of Euphemia's defense, Cornelia was unwilling, but she couldn't refute it. After all, Euphemia's departure was, to a certain extent, Cornelia's acquiescence. Your Majesty Isolum, I wonder if the Britannia Empire's arrangements for you are to your satisfaction? Euphemia looked at Isolum and the others who were guarding the side. Yes. Thank you very much for your help, Your Majesty and the Empire. Our Weiss is satisfied with all the arrangements. Isolum bowed slightly, but said a request that surprised everyone present. Also, this is my personal request. Your Majesty Euphemia, now that Weiss's situation has stabilized, I hope to follow Your Majesty Euphemia as a student and learn how to govern the country. As soon as Isolum's request came out, it immediately attracted the exclamations and discussions of the surrounding people. In an instant, other than the people on Isolum's side, the rest of the people were whispering about the feasibility and possible impact of this request. Sister Royal Kai, what do you think? Euphemia's eyes flashed as she asked Cornelia and Ray Minkai respectively. We will follow Your Majesty's orders. Cornelia didn't object or agree, but she gave the decision to Euphemia. For Cornelia, the addition of the people from the Weiss Empire represented by Isolum was undoubtedly an impact on the current situation of the Britannia Empire. This Weiss Empire that came from another world and joined the Britannia Empire after the adjustment of the Space Administration only had tens of thousands of people left, but Isolum had mastered a technology that could supplement the energy structure of the Britannia Empire. Cornelia believed that Euphemia and even Ray Minkai had foreseen this. Your Majesty, I don't think there's anything wrong with it. Compared to Cornelia's caution, Ray Minkai was much more generous. After Isolum accepted the badge, the Weiss Empire was already in the hands of the Britannia Empire. Now, Isolum's request to join the Britannia Empire as Euphemia's student was based on the badge. Yes. Then, Your Majesty Isolum, do you understand all the requirements, obligations, and even lifelong responsibilities of becoming my student? Yes. Her Majesty Euphemia. Henceforth, the Weiss Empire will temporarily give up its title until Her Majesty Euphemia recognizes me and all the efforts of the Weiss Empire. Isolum reached out and gently took off the crown that symbolized the Weiss Empire. She took 2 steps forward, half knelt on the ground, and presented the crown in her hands with both hands, waiting for Euphemia's decision. Stand up, Isolum. I, and even the Britannia Empire, will not accept the Weiss Empire's crown. This crown can only be kept by you. Her Majesty Euphemia? Isolum looked at Euphemia in surprise, as if she could not understand Euphemia's actions at this moment. Euphemia just smiled and gestured for Isolum to stand beside her. Stand beside me, Isolum. From now on, you are my clerk. The small disturbance of the welcoming ceremony was over, and Isolum became Euphemia's clerk from now on. So hard-working, princess from Mars. In the back garden of the palace, Royd, who had just finished a large-scale inspection of the battleship, saw Isolum, who was holding a pile of documents, shuttling back and forth in the palace before picking up the teacup. Of course, her little follower, Adelizo, was naturally inseparable from her. Let's not talk nonsense, Royd. Did you find out anything about the chip? After returning to Britannia, Ray Minkai gave the chip obtained from Invincible East to Royd. Royd put down the teacup and shook his head regretfully. That chip has been destroyed and is in a complete mess. Apart from detecting an unknown force on it, there's nothing else special. Is that so? In that case, leave it to me. As soon as Ray Minkai finished speaking, Royd suddenly looked at Ray Minkai with bright eyes. Knight, is this the mission given to you by the Authority? In other words, another new technology will be brought back by Knight? Royd, you have to deal with the Lambda drive system and the ELDNOH reactor first. Chapter 501. The title of the chapter was missing. It should be Chapter 497. A white cloak with the head of a flaming lion wrapped around a white military uniform embroidered with gorgeous patterns. A long sword with the exclusive coat of arms of the Britannia royal family was held by the brown beauty with both hands and respectfully handed to Ray Minkai. That was the sword specially prepared for Ray Minkai for the court meeting. Thank you, Viretta. Ray Minkai looked at the brown beauty in front of him and nodded slightly. Ray Minkai was not the only one who participated in the court meeting today. As the adjutant of the night, Viretta naturally had the qualifications to follow Ray Minkai to participate in the court meeting. Moreover, from the brown beauty's meticulous dressing, one could see how much Viretta was looking forward to this court meeting. Speaking of which, it was inevitable. Viretta's biggest wish was to become a member of the nobility. Although this wish was very vulgar, it was a wish formed from Viretta's early experience. One must know that this court meeting was the first one held since Euphemia ascended the throne. Apart from the ascension ceremony a year ago, it was the only time that nobles from all over the country gathered in the capital. Sir, this is what I should do. Viretta's long ponytail wrapped in silk fell on her chest with her slightly lowered head. Seeing this, Ray Minkai raised his hand and gently lifted Viretta's ponytail and put it back on her back. No, Viretta. What I mean is, this year, it's been hard on you. When Ray Minkai traveled between worlds and carried out missions, the entire Night Guards could be said to rely on Viretta to operate. As one of the core members of the Night Guards, Viretta knew that the other two core members, Tsirigu and Titania, maintained an indifferent attitude to almost everything other than participating in the Night Guards training. Therefore, as the Night Guards grew stronger day by day, the burden on Viretta's shoulders became heavier and heavier. However, in the face of such a heavy burden, Viretta was willing to endure it. No, sir. This is what I should do. This time, Viretta no longer lowered her head. Instead, she raised her head and looked straight into Ray Minkai's eyes, as if to express her feelings. Ray Minkai was silent. At this moment, Viretta's eyes were blazing. What a pair of eyes! Ray Minkai's eyes. Viretta, before Ray Minkai could say anything, Valletta spoke first. Let's go, sir. Let me fasten the sword on for you. Ray Minkai was silent. He could only unconsciously lift his cloak and let Viretta carefully fasten the sword on his belt. A silver ponytail, brown skin, and the purple military uniform that Viretta loved the most. In front of Ray Minkai's eyes interweaved into a beautiful picture. Not long after, Viretta, who had fastened the sword, raised her head again, but her eyes met with Ray Minkai's. At this moment, Viretta slightly shifted her gaze, and two red clouds flew up to her cheeks. Sir, it's getting late. Ray Minkai's left hand pressed on the hilt of the sword, nodded slightly, and turned his back to Viretta. Let's go. Viretta. This is the imperial court that will change the empire. Yes, sir. Viretta knew will follow by your side until death. The sun slowly rose from the east, showering the earth with its radiance that it had bestowed upon all living beings on earth. The living beings bathed in the radiance left long shadows on the ground. It's getting hotter. The palace gate hasn't opened yet? The nobles who had rushed back to the capital from all over the country gathered in groups of twos and threes in front of the gate of the palace, forming a small circle that was particularly eye-catching. Although these small circles had all kinds of grudges in the past, they were now complaining in their hearts. When the nobles, big and small, came to participate in the court assembly, none of them seemed to have expected that the door that separated the palace from the outside world did not show any signs of opening even as the sun gradually rose into the sky. Looking at the silent door and the soldiers who were standing on the city walls and looking straight ahead, ignoring the nobles who were being roasted by the sun that was gradually rising to the top of the sky, the small circle on the right side of the door that consisted of only 3 people who were dressed in luxurious clothes and had an even more elegant bearing gradually moved. The 3 people who formed this small circle were one of the 3 great nobles who stood at the top of the Britannia Empire. They respectively controlled the main forces in the military, economic, and political fields, forming a complementary relationship with each other. Under this relationship, the families represented by the 3 of them adopted the practice of marriage when the new generation of the family came of age to strengthen the relationship between the 3 great families. Therefore, when the previous emperor was on the throne, the 3 great families had already faintly formed a force and were ready to take the next step. But they never expected that at this time, the previous emperor died, and the power was seized by Emperor Lucio, and then Euphemia, who had been missing for a long time, made a strong return and successfully ascended to the top. The series of sudden changes made the nobles in the whole empire panic, and also gave the new empress, Euphemia, an opportunity to strike, and in a short time, crippled a lot of the power in the hands of the great nobles. Following that, the 3 great nobles who had finally managed to pull themselves together and gather their forces to launch a counterattack suddenly discovered that the young empress who was sitting on the throne had actually disappeared under the name of the Space Administration, leaving behind Cornelia, who was known as the Imperial Witch, to engage in a battle without any suspense with the nobles of various sizes. Cornelia, the Witch of the Empire, no matter if it was her own side or the enemy, as long as it was not to her liking, it would usher in a disaster. The lucky ones, perhaps after the disaster, would be left with a little life. The unlucky ones. He had already become a member of the huge pit behind the royal city. Wait a little longer. The young empress has returned in the end. The head of the 3 great nobles, the man named Cassius Raymond, raised his gaze and casually glanced at the guards who were standing on the city wall, motionless. Yes. Then, in the end, our tradition can still be carried out. The second greatest noble after Cassius Raymond, Henry A. Kendall, nodded his head. Although the young empress who ran away from home was able to escape for a while, she did not know that her willful actions had shaken the neutral faction. The last of the 3 great nobles, Charlie Colody, revealed a trace of a proud smile. No one will let a willful and reckless person sit on the throne. Therefore, our plan is correct. For the Britannia Empire, no doubt, it is the best choice. Although card artisan Raymond didn't show a smile, his determined gaze had long since exposed his thoughts. The so-called tradition was that the young empress would choose an outstanding young man from among the nobles to marry. Then, she would rely on the young man's family to stabilize her ruling power over the empire. Such a method, whether for the young empress or the lucky family, was a win-win situation. After all, in history, such examples were not few. The scorching sun was high in the sky. The nobles who had been tortured by the scorching sun finally entered the palace. Regardless of what they were thinking, the moment they stepped through the palace gate, a gust of cool wind blew in their faces, instantly lifting their spirits. As their thoughts gradually began to turn, everyone followed the path, passed through the palace, and arrived at the audience room where the court meeting was held. At this moment, everyone's footsteps stopped at the same time. No matter which side they belonged to, they all subconsciously looked at the 3 people walking at the front. Today was the day of the court meeting. At the same time, it was also the day to decide something. Everyone was clear on this point, and they were all waiting for the movements of the 3 people in front. This scene was seen by Ray Minkai and Cornelia, who were standing in the audience room. As expected, this group of nobles who are unwilling to give up are still targeting Her Majesty. Cornelia gritted her teeth and said, Euphemia's escape was undoubtedly the work of these great nobles. This is not bad. At least I don't have to worry about finding trouble for them. Ray Minkai understood Cornelia's hatred. Even before the news of the court meeting spread, Ray Minkai had already prepared for this. Cornelia's gaze turned and fell on Ray Minkai's face, as if she wanted to find a clue from his face. Captain Knight, has Veretta already gathered all the information for you? Yes. To be honest, I am also very surprised. I did not expect Veretta to secretly gather so much information. Ray Minkai nodded in response. However, it was met with a brainless sentence from Cornelia. Yes. What a sinful man. After saying that, Cornelia no longer paid any attention to Lei Minkai, turned around and left, leaving behind a somewhat bewildered Lei Minkai, who immediately came to his senses and smiled bitterly. Dong, dong, dong. As the bell slowly rang out, a group of maids with solemn and dignified expressions stepped into the room first, opening up a path to the throne for the Empress, who had stepped in after them. As the group of maids entered, all the nobles on both sides immediately turned around and paid their respects to the young Empress, who stepped into the audience room. At this moment, solemn music sounded as the young Empress stepped into the audience room, walked on the red carpet, and ascended to the throne that the people of the Empire looked up to. At ease, Euphemia, wearing the Empire's crown and imperial robes, raised her right hand slightly, and the attendant beside her immediately shouted, "Your Majesty, all the nobles and officials who are qualified to participate in the court meeting have arrived." Cornelia, who was standing beside Euphemia, scanned the crowd and turned to Euphemia. "Yes, Captain Knight. Are the preparations complete?" Euphemia nodded slightly and looked at Ray Minkai, who was standing on the left side below. "Yes, Your Majesty. The preparations are complete." The conversation between the three of them confused the great nobles standing at the front. Everyone could understand Cornelia's words. But the conversation between Euphemia and Ray Minkai was confusing. Although they were full of doubts, Euphemia did not give them a chance to think carefully. "Everyone, the purpose of today's court meeting is to welcome the new members of the Britannia Empire." As soon as Euphemia opened her mouth, she attracted everyone's attention. Some of the smarter ones even looked at the young and beautiful girls standing beside Ray Minkai. Even if the nobles present were scattered all over the Britannia Empire, even if they didn't have much contact with each other, they would still meet each other once. Therefore, the strange girls standing beside Ray Minkai were undoubtedly the most eye-catching existence. Aisalam Visser Iliosia, Teresa Testarossa, Mira Ray, Nami Jesuki, 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 Juhu Koichiro, step out. Under Euphemia's signal, the attendant shouted a series of unfamiliar names. Then, under the gaze of many nobles, the girls standing beside Ray Minkai stepped out one by one and stood under the throne. "Captain Knight, can I not go out? It looks like it's very troublesome." Grabbing Jiesuke Suki, who was behind Jiesuke, Juhu Koichiro quietly asked Ray Minkai. Just now, the noble's eyes were undoubtedly attracted by the young and beautiful girls, so Juhu Koichiro and Jiesuke Suki were able to escape the attention of the crowd. "No way, Baron Juhu." Ray Minkai shook his head slightly. Today's imperial court was to completely disclose the existence of the different world to the entire Britannia Empire. Therefore, whether it was the girls, Juhu Koichiro, or Jiesuke Suki, it was necessary. Necessary publicity? I know, Captain Knight. Compared to the tangled Juhu Koichiro, Jiesuke Suki readily stepped out and stood beside Jiesuke, receiving the gaze from many nobles. "Oh, forget it. Just take it for the sake of the Baron." Seeing this, Juhu Koichiro no longer insisted and stepped out. Euphemia and Ray Minkai looked at each other, took the scepter from Cornelia's hand, got up and walked down the throne. "Ithilam Visser Ethiopia." "Yes, Your Majesty." Aisalam bowed slightly, but unexpectedly, it caused many nobles to talk. "Quiet." The sound of the scepter hitting the ground sounded, followed by Euphemia's cold shout. This is Queen Aesalam Visser Iliosia from the Visser Empire. Starting today, she will bring a new technology called the Yeldianoh reactor to our Britannia Empire. For this reason, I will allow Queen Aesalam Visser Iliosia to be my clerk and learn from me how to govern the country. As soon as this statement came out, the audience was in an uproar. A dignified ruler of a country would condescend to learn how to govern the country from the ruler of another country? This was simply a fantasy. Chapter 502. Euphemia's announcement caused everyone to discuss among themselves. The buzzing sound of discussion filled the entire dome of the audience room. Before Euphemia ascended the throne, when the previous Emperor Charles was in charge of the empire, the entire Britannia Empire was belligerent. Every time a country was conquered, the leader of the country would be escorted to the emperor to show his allegiance. However, Euphemia and Ethelham's move was out of everyone's expectations. "Your Majesty." The three nobles looked at each other secretly and exchanged some simple opinions tacitly. For some reason, when Euphemia walked down from the throne and stood in front of Ethelham to announce the news, a sense of loss of control quietly came over the three aristocrats. "Is there any question, Raymond?" Euphemia moved her gaze and fell on the head of the three aristocrats, card artisan Raymond. She knew that in the name of tradition, the mastermind who kept sending information from strangers to her desk was the head of the three aristocrats, card artisan Raymond. "Yes, Your Majesty." Although card artisan Raymond had despised Euphemia so much before, he had no choice but to assume the attitude of a subordinate, respectfully bowing to Euphemia as he spoke. "Although it's a little unexpected, it's the fortune of the Britannia Empire that Her Majesty Ethelham can join our Britannia Empire. However, I don't know how to arrange Her Majesty Ethelham. To be honest, if Her Majesty Ethelham sits with us, I'm afraid. Regarding this point, Raymond, you don't have to worry. As a matter of fact, Her Majesty Ethelham has been following Her Majesty, the Queen of the Britannia Empire, for quite some time now." The one who interrupted card artisan Raymond's speech was Cornelia, and her words immediately made everyone's gaze fall on Ethelham. This young queen actually decided the destination of this foreign queen, who had submitted to the Britannia Empire without saying a word. What a bold move! Privately, after the aristocrats kept exchanging glances, they subconsciously looked at the three aristocrats standing at the front. Faintly, they seemed to have realized that today's court meeting was the opportunity for the young queen to launch an attack on the three aristocrats. It had to be said that the gazes of the nobles who felt more and more that this was the case made the three great nobles standing at the front suddenly feel as if there was a blade on their backs. "What should we do?" The two nobles standing behind card artisan Redmond exchanged glances. Henry Akenda stepped forward and stood beside card artisan Redmond. He then bowed and said, "Your Majesty's decision is wise. However, other than Her Majesty Ethelham, what about the others?" Euphemia did not immediately answer. She raised her hand and guided Athylam up the stairs to the left of the throne. Cornelia and Athylam stood on the left side of the throne. Teresa Testarossa. From today onwards, she will be the captain of the warship Avalon, Viscount Mila Ray. She is the leader of the Britannia Empire's Queen's Personal Knight Regiment, the adopted sister of the Empire's Knight Captain Ray Minkai. At the same time, she will be the deputy director of the Empire's Research Institute's Cutting-Edge Body Development Department, Viscount Nami. Genius Technology Developer. She will be the senior researcher of the Empire's Research Institute's Cutting-Edge Body Development Department, Baron. Jiezhong Shui and Jiezhong Ainafan are siblings of the same bloodline, and they have superb body technology. Especially Jiezhong Ainafan, her keen insight and extraordinary thinking were praised by the Empire's Research Institute's director, Earl Royd. Therefore, Jiezhong Shui will be a member of the Queen's Personal Knight Regiment, Baron. Jiezhong Einafan will be the senior researcher of the Empire's Research Institute, Baron. At the same time, she will be qualified to study in the Empire's university. Euphemia, holding a scepter, stood on the steps, looking down at the aristocrats below, and explained the arrangement of Teresa and the others. However, before Euphemia finished explaining the arrangement of Juhu Koichiro, someone finally couldn't help but jump out. As everyone knew, after Euphemia ascended the throne, the war on a global scale became peaceful. Without the battlefield to gain military service, the aristocrats lost the channel to gain greater benefits and fame. Although for the old aristocrats this was nothing, but after a long time, it gradually became a problem. The older generation of aristocrats didn't care about the amount of military service, but the younger generation relied on military service to improve their status, enhance their prestige, and thus gain more resources from the family and the empire. Without the channel to gain military service, the younger generation gradually changed. Even after Euphemia took control of the throne and publicized the existence of the City of Stars, the younger generation who could participate in Euphemia's development plan for space were few and far between. Hence, even though there was no hope for the younger generation to be promoted, Euphemia actually gave out so many noble titles in one go in such a generous manner. Even if the highest title was only Viscount, the younger generation who lost their military service couldn't even touch the shadow of Baron. Your Majesty, this may be a bit inappropriate, right? Sure enough, not only the three aristocrats, even the neutral party and some of the pro-emperor party couldn't help but speak. Roar. Shut up. You're disturbing me. However, as soon as the aristocrats' noisy voices sounded, a terrifying roar suddenly resounded throughout the audience. Pure white steel armor, shining sharp teeth, revealing a trace of murderous aura, stepped on the steps, protecting Euphemia in the middle. That was a huge steel lion with a height of 3 meters, nearly 10 meters long, Wild Lion Estate 0. Roar. What's the noise? Shut up for me. The golden pupils swept across the audience, scaring most of the aristocrats into taking a step back. The Empire's sacred beast, State 0. From that day onwards, there was no one who didn't know about it. But to see State 0's lion form at such a close distance, no matter if it was the three aristocrats or the others, it was the first time. Sacred beast? In the eyes of others, the most common form of State 0, known as the Empire's sacred beast, was a pure white lion with a body of long pure white fur, with golden radiance between its opening and closing. Or it was the huge steel lion form that far exceeded the size of a normal KMF. Looking at State 0 in front of him, card artisan Raymond couldn't help but swallow a breath. That barbaric aura that came rushing over not only shook card artisan Raymond's mind, but it also made a flaw appear in his thinking. Is it quiet now? You guys continue, I'll lie down here. State 0 looked around again, and guarded Euphemia, lying down at the bottom of the steps. After State 0's sudden attack, most of the people present wanted to retreat. The fierceness of the Long Fong lion style was obvious to all. Especially now, these aristocrats, who were no different from ordinary people, were facing the savage aura of the savage and ferocious State 0. Their biological instincts that had been passed down for thousands of years quietly awakened, and controlled their bodies that were intimidated by the wild lion to retreat. No one dared to use their flesh and blood to fight against the ferocious lion that had a steel body. Euphemia's gaze moved slightly, and looked at Ray Minkai. After nodding slightly, she looked at the head of the three aristocrats, card artisan Raymond. Chancellor Raymond, what do you think? Euphemia's voice was calm, but with a sense of authority that couldn't be disobeyed. However, card artisan Raymond knew that if he retreated here, then this young empress would completely control the aristocrats of the empire, and she could do anything she wanted. Yes, Your Majesty. I still feel that something is wrong. Although there are many new members joining the Britannia Empire, It is our honor. However, such a generous reward is unfair to the younger generation of our empire, who have always been loyal to the empire and have always been committed to the empire. Card artisan Raymond chose his words carefully and expressed his thoughts. Euphemia nodded and didn't express her opinion. Instead, she looked at Henry Akenda, who was second only to card artisan Raymond. Akenda, what about you? Henry Akenda was silent for a moment, and then replied respectfully. My opinion is the same as Raymond's. Euphemia nodded again, and still didn't express her opinion. She moved her gaze again, and looked at the last of the three aristocrats who had been silent, Charlie Collody. Your Majesty, I think we still need to think about it. Unsurprisingly, since the first generation of the three aristocrats joined hands, they had been advancing and retreating together. Even when facing State Zero, who was lying on the steps, it was still the same. So, does anyone else have any opinions? The three aristocrats' answer was expected, but Euphemia still looked around, waiting for others' opinions. Perhaps in the face of the three aristocrats' attitude, Euphemia didn't show any resistance, or an unhappy attitude. The aristocrats who were just shocked by the wild lion began to have other thoughts. This time, to their surprise, even the royalists had different opinions. But even if there were differences, those who supported Euphemia were the minority of the royalists. This disagreement made Cornelia, who was standing on the right side of the throne, secretly clench her teeth. She didn't expect that at this critical moment, the royalists who swore loyalty to Euphemia would drop the ball. As her resentful eyes flashed, Cornelia saw that Ray Minkai was still calm. Has the knight predicted this situation? As if he felt Cornelia's gaze, Ray Minkai nodded slightly to her, and then turned back to the brown beauty Veretta who was standing behind him. Without saying anything, just a slight nod, Veretta had already understood Ray Minkai's meaning. It seems that everyone is very resistant to the addition of a new member. Euphemia smiled reassuringly at Teresa, Mira, and the others. She turned around and returned to the front of the throne through the path that Wild Lion Zero had made. She turned around again and looked down at everyone below. Why, I remember someone told me before that maintaining the stability of an empire is undoubtedly maintaining its tradition. Under the inertia brought by tradition, the current situation of the empire is undoubtedly the most stable, and also the most difficult to defeat. Euphemia's gaze gradually moved to card artisan Raymond. Without a doubt, Euphemia's target was him. Card artisan Raymond flashed a few times. He knew that the young empress's counterattack had finally arrived. After taking a few deep breaths, card artisan Raymond, the head of the three aristocrats, stood up and slightly raised his head to look at the young empress. Yes, Your Majesty. Now that Your Majesty has just ascended the throne, whether it is within or outside the country, it is in an unstable state. At this critical moment, if something were to happen, I am afraid that the foundation that our Britannia Empire has built over 100 years will be destroyed. Then, Raymond, do you have any suggestions? Or is it a good idea? To card artisan Raymond's surprise, Euphemia did not open her mouth to refute his words. Instead, she went along with his words and went all the way. This abnormal attitude made card artisan Raymond's words suddenly stuck in his throat, and he was unable to say anything. Card artisan Raymond, who had been rolling around among the aristocrats of the empire for a long time, instinctively felt that the young empress had dug a trap for him. Say, or not say. At this moment, a soft voice came from behind. Chancellor Raymond, what are you still hesitating for? This was Henry A. Kendall's voice. Without turning his head, card artisan Raymond knew that the remaining Charlie Collody was also the same. There is no turning back. Card artisan Raymond took a few steps forward and stood in front of the stairs. He looked up at the young empress and shouted loudly. Your Majesty! Her Imperial Majesty Euphemia Le Britannia! In order to maintain the stability of the empire, Your Majesty needs someone who can support Your Majesty to sit on the throne and govern the empire. Your Majesty, please make a decision as soon as possible." Looking at the face that showed that he was thinking for her, and the face that was filled with grief, Euphemia could not help but feel a wave of disgust in her heart. He asked back and forth, but all he got was the same answer. In order to maintain the stability of the empire, Euphemia must have a prince by her side. And the so-called prince must be chosen from the aristocrats. Undoubtedly, it was to use the royal family's influence to expand their own family's influence. This is really ridiculous. A wave of anger quietly rose from Euphemia's eyes. Raymond, your so-called suggestion, your so-called good idea is this? Yes, Your Majesty. In order to maintain the stability of the empire. Shut up, Raymond. You disappoint me. Euphemia shouted coldly, interrupting card artisan Raymond's words. At the same time, Wild Lion Zero, who was lying on the stairs, raised its huge steel head and looked down at card artisan Raymond. Under the cold gleam of the sharp teeth was card artisan Raymond's stubborn expression. Your Majesty, this is... Pa! Without any warning, a stack of documents fell from the sky and directly hit card artisan Raymond's face. Card artisan Raymond, maybe you should take a look at these documents. Take a look at what your so-called tradition has made you do. Unknowingly, Veretta walked up the stairs with a stack of documents in her hands and stood beside Euphemia. The documents that hit card artisan Raymond's face just now were the documents in Veretta's hands. Under Euphemia's cold voice, card artisan Raymond saw a few names that he was extremely familiar with from the scattered papers. Those were the names of the younger generation in his family. At the same time, they were the most vile ones who had committed many crimes, but under the protection of his family, they had escaped the Empire's punishment time and time again. At this moment, card artisan Raymond understood. The young Empress on the throne was already prepared. She was not as innocent as they had imagined, nor was she the Empress who had been regarded as a vase by the aristocrats over the years. The documents in Veretta's hands were probably the crimes of the three aristocrats since their rise to power. At the same time, it was also the scythe of death that sent the three aristocrats to hell. Raymond. Sensing card artisan Raymond's strange behavior, the two people hurriedly called out, but were stopped by card artisan Raymond. Card artisan Raymond raised his gaze and looked at Euphemia, then looked at Veretta, who was holding the documents, then looked at the wild lion who was looking down at him. Finally, he looked at Ray Minkai, who was standing opposite him and hadn't said a word since the beginning. Ray Minkai, Imperial Knight Commander. We have indeed underestimated you. Ray Minkai's gaze moved, but he only smiled faintly in response to card artisan Raymond. The aristocrats who were used to being high up didn't know what kind of situation the Britannia Empire was facing. Even though Euphemia had gone to great lengths to bring them to the City of Star Glory, it was only used as a topic for them to talk about after a meal. The aristocrats who only cared about the world in front of them and refused to move forward, rather than dragging the empire down, might as well get rid of them today. Without receiving any response from Ray Minkai, card artisan Raymond seemed to already know the fate of himself and his family. Your Majesty, please give the order. The moment he said this, card artisan Raymond, who was revered by tens of thousands of people and was regarded as a role model by many aristocrats, seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. His entire aura turned gray and drifted away. Perhaps, in that second, this card artisan Raymond, who had once been full of mettle and had attempted to control the young Empress through marriage, would die. Personal Knight Regiment, take card artisan Raymond, Henry Akand, and Charlie Collody away to await the trial of the three aristocrats. Yes, Your Majesty. It wasn't that no one wanted to speak up for the three aristocrats, but when Euphemia ordered her men to take Cassius and the other two away, the wild lion that was lying on the stairs suddenly stood up. The armed sword on its back moved back and forth towards the crowd, the cold light reflected from the blade piercing everyone's eyes and causing them to feel pain. After watching the three being taken away by the personal knight regiment without any resistance, the pair of burning eyes quietly moved and made contact with Rei Minkai's gaze in midair. Seeing Rei Minkai's worried eyes, the anger in Euphemia's eyes disappeared, leaving only tenderness and a trace of shyness. Under this trace of shyness, the young empress slightly raised the scepter in her hand and forcefully pressed it on the ground. Silence. Everyone was silent. Card artisan Raymond is right. The Britannia Empire needs a prince. But I don't want the Britannia Empire's prince to be born from the aristocrats. Because, before card artisan Raymond's suggestion, the position of prince next to the empress of the Britannia Empire had already been taken. The shyness in her eyes gradually faded, leaving behind a determined and unrepentant light. At this moment Cornelia, who noticed Euphemia's abnormality, moved the corner of her mouth, but chose to acquiesce. As Euphemia's elder sister, how could Cornelia not notice her sister's thoughts? But now Euphemia had already spread her wings and soared high, a phoenix that the world looked up to. Captain of the Britannia Empire's personal knight regiment, Imperial Knight Regiment, Rei Minkai, stepped forward. Once the words were spoken, Rei Minkai immediately became the focus of the entire crowd. Right now, Rei Minkai was dumbfounded. No one had ever told him that Euphemia would make such a move in the imperial court. On the throne, the young empress's mouth curved into a gentle smile. She reached out her left hand to her guardian knight and said softly, "Kai, my knight, come here. Come to my side." Chapter 503. The sword at his waist was gradually removed and replaced by a sword called the King's Sword. This was not the legendary sword, but a sword that the previous emperors of the Britannia Empire ordered to imitate according to the legend. Although the sword was placed in the palace's warehouse after it was successfully manufactured, it was now able to see the light of day again under the orders of Euphemia. Excalibur. With his left hand on the hilt, Rei Minkai smiled helplessly in his heart. He did not expect that he would become the owner of this legendary sword one day. Moreover, there was an additional crown on his head called the Prince. Euphemia not only solved the dilemma brought by the three great aristocrats, but also announced the decision to appoint Rei Minkai as the Prince of the Britannia Empire. Opposition? That's right. There would definitely be people who would oppose this decision. However, under the shock of the three great aristocrats' sudden downfall, no one dared to oppose this decision on the spot. Thus, the Britannia Empire's decision to welcome a new prince instantly spread throughout the world. Congratulations! Congratulations! Captain Knight, no, now it should be Your Highness the Prince. Royd and Cecil walked out from the corner and repeatedly congratulated Rei Minkai. Congratulations, Your Highness the Prince. Cecil seemed to have become a little reserved. No. This is just an announcement of this decision. Rei Minkai smiled bitterly and shook his head. Although it was just a verbal statement, the surrounding people had already regarded Rei Minkai as the Prince of the Britannia Empire. After all, after Euphemia disappeared from the Battle of the Nine States and later returned, the relationship between Rei Minkai and Euphemia was clear to anyone with a discerning eye. Now, he was just making this relationship public. However, this is the decision that everyone wants, isn't it? Your Highness the Prince. Royd's smile had a trace of relief. Your Highness. Although it's a bit belated to say this now, when His Highness the Prince went out on missions, His Majesty suffered more than we imagined. Recalling Euphemia's performance in the court session, Rei Minkai couldn't help but lower his gaze. Really? In that case, now is the time to collect interest. Rei Minkai held the hilt of the legendary sword tightly. As the cloak embroidered with the blazing lion fluttered, Rei Minkai had already stepped out of the palace gate. Outside the palace gate, young knights dressed in the uniform of the personal guard knight regiment stood with their backs straight and their eyes resolute. Behind these knights, the silver Lionheart Knights were particularly eye-catching. "Your Highness, please give the order." The one who led these young knights here was Titania. Titania? Chi Ligu didn't come? Ray Minkai looked around but did not see Kiligu's figure. The next mission wasn't going to be an easy one. Therefore, Ray Minkai hoped to use the most powerful force in his hands to create a terrifying memory for the entire Britannia Empire. Yes, Xiligu and Fianna have already left. Titania's answer stunned Ray Minkai at first, then he laughed heartily. If two nation-destroying mech pilots were to move out together, the Personal Guard Knight Regiment would probably only be able to tour the 3 aristocratic residences for a day. Without thinking much, Ray Minkai pulled out the legendary sword from his waist and pointed it forward. Personal Guard Knight Regiment target, the 3 aristocratic residences. Move out. At this moment the mechs roared. The Queen's Personal Guard Knight Regiment was like a flood of steel, sweeping across the entire kingdom. Bang! Bang! The sound of gunfire became ghosts that lingered in the sky of the Empire, constantly circling and never dissipating. On the square of the royal capital there were numerous gallows. On them were the people who had committed many crimes and were being punished by the Empire. Wow! Is this another reckoning? On the square of the kingdom, a girl with beautiful long black hair tied into a high ponytail looked at the scene that was happening in the kingdom in surprise. "Over there, please don't come near here." The soldiers guarding the gallows were very alert. Sorry. I'm just a little curious. Bye-bye." As the high ponytail swayed back and forth, the girl had already turned and left the square of the kingdom, heading straight for the palace. I didn't expect Euphemia and Ray Minkai to make such a big scene. The struggle in the palace is really scary. However, the girl did not know that the moment she appeared in the kingdom, her presence had already reached Ray Minkai's desk. "Himimi is here? Get ready. Also, inform Her Majesty." Ray Minkai glanced at the photos taken by the spies all over the kingdom and shook his head helplessly. It was a matter that could be solved with one word, but it unknowingly caused the entire kingdom's intelligence network to be shaken. This really made people feel helpless. With her hands behind her back, Himimi leisurely came in front of Ray Minkai. "Welcome, Himimi. I didn't expect you to come at this time. Aren't you going to take the test with the Venerable?" Looking at the swaying ponytail, Ray Minkai was very puzzled. Himimi clearly did not move, but the ponytail was moving without wind. "Grandfather? I've passed the test. Today is my day off, so I came here to take a seat." Himimi looked around and found that there was nothing new in Ray Minkai's office. She looked at Ray Minkai and asked, "Where is Her Majesty Euphemia?" "She's coming. Please wait a moment." Ray Minkai poured the black tea prepared by Veretta into a teacup and handed it to Himimi. "Is that so? Well, then I won't wait for Her Majesty Euphemia." Himimi pondered for a moment and went straight to the point. "Ray Minkai. In fact, I'm here for a mission." Ray Minkai raised his eyebrows, but he was not surprised. "Please speak." Himimi nodded, picked up the teacup, and took a sip before she started talking. "Ray Minkai, do you still remember the chip that grandfather gave you?" Ray Minkai nodded slightly, turned around and walked to the desk. He took out a carefully preserved chip from the drawer. This was the chip that Invincible East gave to Ray Minkai. In fact, this chip has some unusual part, and this unusual part may be related to your upcoming mission. Himimi's gaze wandered around the chip. "Mission? You've decided so quickly?" Ray Minkai calculated the time and realized that less than a week had passed since the end of his last mission. "Well, there's no other way. Who asked your situation to be unique in the Space Administration? If we calculate based on the frequency of a normal patrol officer, your current frequency is already 3 times that of a normal patrol officer. At the same time period." "Yes, at the same time period." Himimi gestured with her right hand. Normally, after a patrol officer completes a mission, they will have a month to 3 months of rest and recuperation. This is due to the special circumstances of the Space Administration. After all, no one can predict what kind of accident will happen during the course of the work. I know that. But I haven't even finished a week, and I have to go on patrol? Well, I'm very sorry. I've said it just now. This is a special situation. Moreover, the Space Administration will not treat you unfairly. Mimi waved her hand, and a list of materials, even body parts, and many other names appeared in front of Ray Minkai. This is the list of subsidies for your vacation. As long as you agree to go on patrol, then the items on the list will be delivered in the shortest time possible. In addition, this list is based on the current technological level of the Britannia Empire. So, you don't need to worry about the items on the list not being usable. Looking at the list full of names, Ray Minkai sighed secretly. It seems that I have to go. Otherwise, I'm not worthy of such a generous reward. Click. At this time, the door opened. Euphemia, who was dressed in a white imperial robe, slowly walked into the office while being escorted by the crowd. Welcome to my empire. Mimi. Euphemia first looked at Ray Minkai, then saluted Mimi. I'm here to disturb you again. Her Majesty Euphemia. I hope I won't cause you any trouble. Mimi waved her hand and glanced at the crowd. Euphemia also noticed this small movement. You can leave first. Everyone bowed and slowly retreated, leaving only Ray Minkai, Euphemia, and Mimi. After the door closed, Mimi leaned back on the sofa and looked at Euphemia. It seems that you have the empire in your hands. The square in the royal city really surprised me. Euphemia's face darkened, but she didn't hide anything. Yes. That's the punishment for the crimes committed in the past. The so-called nobles will always be associated with crimes that are unclear and unknown to the public. Is that so? Forget it. No matter which world it is, it's almost the same. So, let's not talk about these things that spoil the mood. Mimi waved her hand and took the initiative to stop this topic. Yes. I'm sorry for being rude. Euphemia nodded, then sat down beside Ray Minkai and noticed the list on the table. It's my payment for my attendance. UFFI. There are a lot of supplies. Especially in some key areas, our industrial department just submitted a list of urgently needed supplies. Euphemia browsed quickly. In just a few breaths, she saw the importance of this list to the Britannia Empire. Is that so? Then, my mission this time is worth it. Ray Minkai picked up the list and waved it. Mission? Are we setting off again? Euphemia froze for a moment. She didn't expect a new mission to come so quickly. 2 days ago, Ray Minkai and Euphemia announced the oath that they made. Yes. UFFI. Didn't you say that our empire is lacking these supplies? No matter what, Ray Minkai's mission this time was inevitable. Whether it was the development needs of the empire or the chip that Dongfang Booby gave him, none of them were as important as the time bomb in Euphemia's body. Moreover, there was no progress on the materialization of the fragment that he gave to the Ministry of Justice. This made Ray Minkai even more worried. But, the ministers just submitted a memorial this morning. Euphemia knew the importance of the mission of the Space Administration, but thinking of the memorial that the ministers jointly submitted this morning, Euphemia's voice gradually became softer. UFFI, is there a problem? As Euphemia's voice became softer and softer, Ray Minkai was unable to hear what she was saying clearly. Mimi, who was sitting on the opposite side, sized up the two of them for a while, and then understood. Cough, cough. Seems like I came at the wrong time. How about this? I'll go back. No. Just leave it at that. However, Ray Minkai's attitude was firm. Euphemia looked at Ray Minkai in shock. Are you sure? Mimi looked at Ray Minkai and asked. I'm sure. Ray Minkai nodded his head. Good. Then, tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., report to the Space Administration. She came like the wind and left like the wind. After Mimi left, only the two of them were left in the office. The young empress sat on the sofa and remained silent. Rei Minkai stood by the window with his back facing Euphemia. He did not know what to say for a moment. Minkai, don't worry and go. This time, I'll stay here and lead the empire forward. Unexpectedly, Euphemia did not request to follow Rei Minkai, but chose to stay. UFFI. Rei Minkai turned around and looked at Euphemia. His mouth moved and thousands of words finally turned into gratitude. Thank you. My cute highness. The moon set and the sun rose. When the sun rose from the horizon, Rei Minkai left the capital of the Britannia Empire and stepped into the teleportation gate to Xingyao City. It's another solo mission. What a pity, Your Highness. Standing in front of the door of the Time Control Department, Rei Minkai heard a familiar voice. State 0, you're too heavy. To this, Rei Minkai only said a word, and the owner of the voice gave himself away. Shut up, Kai. I just ate a little too much cherry stone. Anyway, in the state of the tusk lion, my weight is constant. But in the state of a kitten, you're fat. Roar. Kai. You're looking for death. A roar swept over. It was as if a giant beast from the wilderness had pounced on Rei Minkai. Roar. Rei Minkai did not care about the deafening roar. Instead, he reached out his hand and pinched the gate of destiny. The little white cat that was clamoring to bite Rei Minkai was brought in front of him. Well, you really ate a lot. State 0. Roar. Who cares? Anyway, all the cherry stones in the warehouse are mine. It's a waste not to eat them. Eat your fill. Time to work. State 0. Chapter 504. Planet Eden. This was a planet that was suitable for human habitation. From the moment the Earth unified and discovered its existence, humans began to migrate to this planet. At the same time, a military facility called New Edward Flight Test Center was built on it. It was to use this military facility built on planet Eden to carry out a new airframe plan to replace the current VF fighter. Project Supernova. This was a brand new plan to replace the old VF-11 with a new fighter that Earth unification had high hopes for. Of course, this was not a brand new plan that was specially launched for a single fighter. Instead, it was a test plan that was carried out by two test flight teams from different development companies. In the competition between these two competing test flight teams, whoever developed a fighter that could stand out in the final test would become the final winner of Earth unification's replacement of the old VF-11. Therefore, the YF-19 test flight team from New Star Industries and the YF-21 test flight team from GE Galaxy began to compete fiercely in the New Edward Flight Test Center. However, in this fierce competition, the YF-19 test flight team welcomed at least 4 test pilots one after another. However, these skillful and confident test pilots were all defeated in the face of the ultra-high performance of the YF-19. Either they were sent to the hospital for emergency treatment, or they were promoted by 2 levels on the spot and returned to their families with their nameplates and bodies. This was undoubtedly a great nightmare for the YF-19 test flight team. However, GE Galaxy's YF-21 test flight team was not happy about this. Although the test pilots of the YF-19 test flight team repeatedly failed, replaced them, and the test progress continued to be delayed, the YF-21 team, which was one step ahead, also encountered the same accident. YF-21's development director and test pilot, Garnet Gao Bowman, suddenly had an accident during a test flight. Although with Garnet's efforts, the YF-21 was preserved and did not suffer much overall damage, Garnet was injured by the explosion of the instrument in the cockpit. The most serious injury was his right hand that was penetrated by the debris from the explosion. The rest of his body was only a superficial injury. For ordinary people, perhaps they would just have to wear a sling and spend some time with their right hand in a sling. However, for Garnet it was a fatal injury. Seeing that YF-21, which he had poured his heart and soul into, was about to compete in the supernova project, he encountered such an accident. With his right hand injured, Garrett could be said to have lost the opportunity to drive the YF-21. Therefore, in desperation, Garrett could only submit the report to the owner of the supernova project, Colonel Millard, and start the repair work of YF-21. Fortunately, the overall structure of the YF-21 was relatively well preserved. After the various instruments in the cockpit were replaced, it could be repaired and debugged. As the day of the test was getting closer and closer, the report submitted by Garrett finally received a response. Garrett. This was the test pilot sent by the headquarters to support the YF-19 team. His name is Ray Minkai. As soon as he walked into Millard's office, Garrett saw a young pilot wearing a pilot's jacket with a white cat lying on his shoulder. Garrett didn't say anything. He only responded to Millard with a salute before sizing up the young man who was standing upright. Unbeknownst to him, while he was sizing up the pilot sent by headquarters, the other party was also sizing him up. Even if the bloodline of the Jetlati was miniaturized, he still had a height of more than 2 meters. Standing in front of him, there was indeed an unusual sense of oppression. However, Ray Minkai already knew what kind of person the person in front of him was. Garrett. This was one of the goals of Ray Minkai's mission this time. Although the mission of the Space Administration did not mention much about Garrett, from his intuition, Ray Minkai faintly felt that this might be an opportunity. Especially when Ray Minkai saw Garrett, who was supposed to be piloting the YF-21 for a test flight mission, but his right hand was injured, the intuition in his heart became even stronger. Therefore, Ray Minkai must make good use of Himimi and use some unknown power to create an opportunity for him to become a test pilot sent by Earth Integration to this flight test center. Ray Minkai. This is the identity ID of Earth Integration. After you enter that world, you should be able to use it. Thinking of Himimi's instructions, Ray Minkai gradually formed a plan in his mind. I don't remember writing in the report that a pilot with a little white cat would be sent to support. Garrett withdrew his gaze from Ray Minkai and said in a deep voice, "This might already be considered a provocation." Ray Minkai moved his gaze slightly and glanced at Millard, who was watching from the sidelines and did not express any opinions. He took a step forward and retorted, "If you only rely on the standard of PET to judge the strength of the other party, then I think an injury to your right hand is indeed a very commendable thing." What? An injury to his right hand was something that Garrett did not want to happen, and it was also his scar. Unexpectedly, Ray Minkai opened his scar as soon as he opened his mouth. Anger suddenly rushed to Garrett's head, but at the moment of his outburst, Millard finally spoke. "Stop, Garrett." After stopping Garrett's actions, Millard shifted his gaze to Ray Minkai and introduced him, Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. This is General Galaxy Director Garrett Gao-Bowman, who is responsible for the development of YF-21 and is also the test pilot of YF-21. But not long ago, Director Garrett had an accident during a test flight, resulting in an injury to his right hand. That's why you're here to support. Yes, Colonel Millard. Ray Minkai responded, then saluted Garrett. "Director Garrett, I'm Ray Minkai, Second Lieutenant. From today onwards, I'll be responsible for the test flight mission of YF-21. Nice to meet you." Garrett suppressed the anger in his heart, but he was reluctant to shake hands with Ray Minkai. But under Millard's gaze, Garrett finally reached out and reconciled with Ray Minkai. However, the handshake between the two sides was a little long. The physique of the Jetlati people is really as strong as the rumors say. After the two sides released their hands, Ray Minkai praised with a relaxed expression. However, Garrett's expression was one of astonishment. Just now, when Garrett shook hands with Ray Minkai, he did play a little trick. However, He didn't expect that under Garrett's gradually increasing strength, not only did Lei Mingkai not show any signs of pain, but he also made Garrett feel a force that was almost the same as his, one that was resisting each other. Is this the power possessed by humans? The physique of the Jetlati people was famous throughout the galaxy. After transforming into giants, the Jetlati people could even rely on their physical body to use the heavy weapons used to equip the VF fighter. In comparison, humans could only be described as weak. Seeing Lei Mingkai in front of him, Garrett couldn't help but re-evaluate his thoughts. Perhaps he had really misjudged him. Colonel Milad. Second Lieutenant Lei Mingkai came at the right time. Now the repair work of YF-21 is completed. We can start the test again. With all kinds of thoughts in his mind, Garrett re-reported to Milad about the repair progress of YF-21. Has the repair work been completed? Milad pondered for a moment, then looked at Lei Mingkai. Second Lieutenant, do you have any questions? Lei Mingkai responded, No problem. Colonel, I can perform the mission at any time. And then, let's get started. Milad nodded, and then when Garrett was about to leave with Lei Mingkai, he mentioned it casually. By the way, Yang Nguyen seems to have found a test pilot, and he will report here in the near future. Garrett nodded slightly. I see. However, our YF-21 is the best. No matter how many pilots come from Yang Nguyen's side, the result will not change. It's good to have this confidence. Then, I will leave Second Lieutenant Lei Mingkai to you for the time being. Understood. The hill-like figure walked silently in front. After coming out of Milad's office, Garrett had been focused on leading the way in front. He did not slow down, nor did he turn around to introduce everything about the new Edward Flight Test Center to Lei Mingkai. Does that big guy hate you? White Cat State Zero lay motionlessly on Lei Mingkai's shoulder, but its voice sounded in Lei Mingkai's mind. When Garrett looked at it just now, that indifferent and contemptuous gaze made White Cat State Zero gnash its teeth in hatred. If it was not for the fact that it could not reveal its identity now, White Cat State Zero would have jumped up and greeted Garrett with its sharp teeth. Probably. Lei Mingkai shrugged his shoulders indifferently. The White Cat, State Zero, who was lying on his shoulder, quickly changed its position to stabilize its body. I feel like a human child whose favorite toy has been snatched away. White Cat State Zero glanced at Garrett's back disdainfully, revealing two sharp canine teeth. Quiet. We've reached Naku. Garrett stopped in front and lowered his body slightly in front of the checkpoint leading to Naku, letting the detection probe aim at his pupil. At the same time, he also put his left hand on the palm print detector. I'm Garrett, now leading the new test pilot to start the test mission. After a round of inspection, after the pupil, voice print, and palm print were all confirmed, the Naku where YF-21 was parked opened in front of Lei Mingkai. Surrounded by more than 10 ground crew members, a fighter that Lei Mingkai was very familiar with was quietly parked in Naku. Through the many connections from the side, it was carefully tested again and again by the system, trying to find possible fault. YF-21, Swift. This is the product of my painstaking efforts. Second Lieutenant Lei Mingkai, do you know the importance of your mission? Garrett stopped and looked at the new fighter that was quietly waiting for the arrival of his knight from afar. Yes, I have a full understanding of the upcoming mission. Lei Mingkai responded without hesitation. And, change your clothes and sit on it. Let me see to what extent your awareness has reached. Without any hesitation or pause, Garrett raised his left hand and pointed at the YF-21 Swift. His voice was so loud that it attracted everyone who was preparing for YF-21. Garrett was straightforward, and Lei Mingkai was even more straightforward. Even if he was watched by everyone, Lei Mingkai swiftly changed into the pilot suit specially designed for YF-21 under Garrett's guidance. It was equipped with the BDI brainwave control system developed by Garrett. Although it was not much different from other pilot suits, there was an obvious difference in the subtle feeling. Especially after Ray Minkai sat in the cockpit of YF-21, he waited for the ground crew to put on the coat that was linked to the BDI system. "Second Lieutenant, I will temporarily take care of your cat for you." In Garrett's huge palm was the white cat that looked obedient and motionless, but in fact it was secretly cursing. "Hey, Kai, you won't let this big guy look at me, right?" In this regard, Ray Minkai was unmoved. The white cat State Zero grinned and struggled a few times, but found that Garrett's grip was indeed very strong. In desperation, the white cat State Zero could only choose to stay, obediently, in order to avoid hurting Garrett, who it regarded as a big guy. The first and second sensory system, there is no abnormality. Brainwave control system, the connection is good. The staff in charge of the monitoring system raised his head and looked at Garrett. Members who participated in the YF-21 development project knew that to be able to truly pilot the YF-21 and control the BDI, brainwave control system loaded on it, one must learn 45 hours of relevant introductory knowledge in advance, 35 hours of training to establish images in the brain, and at least 120 hours of extremely time-consuming training to establish a database of brainwave activity. Only then would one be qualified to pilot the YF-21. The members who were very familiar with this saw that Garrett actually allowed the new pilot to board the YF-21 at once. No one would not be puzzled. "Let's begin." Garrett did not pay attention to the doubts of his team members, but directly ordered. Perhaps he wanted to test the ability of this support pilot. Or perhaps he wanted to let this support pilot have a taste of his own medicine. In short, with Garrett's acquiescence, the coat of the BDI system was finally linked to Ray Minkai. "Second Lieutenant, do you know about meditation?" Garrett's voice suddenly sounded in Ray Minkai's ear. Ray Minkai did not speak, but silently said yes in his heart. In the next second, a voice that was synthesized by electrons and replicated Ray Minkai's voice to the greatest extent suddenly sounded. Astonishment, surprise, all appeared on the faces of the members of the YF-21 development team. In addition to the surprise, everyone's eyes also converged on Garrett's face. Similarly, they saw the surprise on Garrett's face. "Continue." Garrett took a deep breath and ordered. A group of self-righteous fools. The well-behaved, white cat State Zero glanced slightly at the people around and secretly laughed in his heart. With Ray Minkai's strength, coupled with the secret assistance of the white cat State Zero, wouldn't this fighter be easy to capture? The cockpit cover slowly closed, and Ray Minkai was also completely linked to the YF-21 at this moment. Man-machine brainwave connection. Echo complete. Garrett spoke again. "Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, can the setting of the BDI system in the brain do it?" The corners of Ray Minkai's mouth curled up slightly, and he directly responded to Garrett with practical actions. As Ray Minkai's brainwaves became more active, the 3 cameras installed at the nose of the YF-21 kept moving and changing the shooting angle. A picture that was constantly distorted but quickly adjusted to normal magnification quietly generated in Ray Minkai's mind. At the same time, with the movement of Ray Minkai's eyeballs, various camera methods such as X-ray, infrared, normal light were switched one by one. The BDI system setup completed. In the midst of the incredulous voice, Garrett slowly closed his eyes and seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. This new mech pilot seemed to be even more capable than he had imagined. "Second Lieutenant, take off." "Understood." As a result, the YF-21, which lost the test pilot due to accidental damage and almost lost the qualification to compete, once again took off from the takeoff runway of the new Edward Flight Test Center. Chapter 505. YF-21. The legendary mysterious body that could be controlled through the brainwave control system. No matter how much Ray Minkai imagined when he was young, what kind of scenery it would be when he could board the YF-21, it was not as shocking as sitting in the YF-21 now and connecting with the BDI system installed on it. As long as he was connected to the BDI system, even if Ray Minkai was sitting in the tightly protected cockpit, he could still feel the airflow from the fuselage and the wings. Ray Minkai could not use any words to describe this wonderful feeling. In the end, Ray Minkai could only sigh in his heart that this trip was not in vain. This is the Flight Test Center. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, how do you feel now? After Ray Minkai took off with the YF-21, Garrett returned to the command hall of the new Edward Flight Test Center with the White Cat, State Zero. Little did they know that the moment the cute White Cat, State Zero appeared in this command hall, it attracted everyone's attention. There was no other reason. In the impression of everyone in the new Edward Flight Test Center, Garrett was a strict and unsmiling director of new airframe development. Even if he was also a test pilot, he would only give them the illusion that the crystallization of one's own hard work should be tested by oneself until it is developed to the most perfect. Therefore, when the small and cute White Cat, State Zero, was brought to the command hall by Garrett, the scene that happened was not surprising. Very good. It feels like the YF-21 is my own body. Ray Minkai smiled slightly and said in his mind. He knew that the BDI system would inevitably accurately repeat his thoughts. Garrett nodded slightly. After looking around at the people who pretended not to care but secretly drifted over, he bent down and put the White Cat, State Zero, on the ground. Stay here. After Garrett said softly, he turned around and took the headset from the correspondent, ready to connect with Ray Minkai. After the White Cat, State Zero, was placed on the ground, it shook its head left and right and found that there was nothing unusual about the command center. It jumped on the table and lay down, accepting the gazes from around. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. Report current location. The White Cat's action made Garrett move his gaze slightly. After confirming that the kitten would not run away, Garrett immediately devoted himself to his work. Currently in the 7th District, altitude 36800. Ray Minkai's eyes were closed. With just a thought, the data he needed to know quietly emerged in his mind. Very well. According to the original plan, YF-21 should have completed the BDI system, is now ready to enter the next stage of testing. But due to some accidents, YF-21's plan can only be returned to the BDI system adjustment plan. Fortunately, Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, you really surprised me. When the YF-21 signal symbol appeared on the screen of the command center, Garrett slowly breathed a sigh of relief. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, can you complete the adjustment of the BDI system by today? As soon as Garrett's words came out, the people in the command center suddenly exclaimed. Since the launch of the Supernova project, the performance of Garrett and YF-21 had been deeply engraved in everyone's heart. Garrett spent a lot of effort to smoothly pilot the latest advanced fighter, and they actually want this new pilot to complete the BDI system adjustment within a day? Isn't this forcing people to do it? In the exclamation, the White Cat, State Zero, opened its eyes slightly, glanced at Garrett and sighed secretly. Always giving such difficult questions. No problem. Ray Minkai's refreshing voice interrupted the exclamation in the command center. At the same time, it also made the corner of Garrett's mouth curl up slightly for a moment. Then, let's begin. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. In the sky above an altitude of 38,600 meters, YF-21, who was flying alone in this barren airspace, was lonely but also free. As the BDI system and Ray Minkai's connection became deeper and deeper, Ray Minkai felt that this might be the legendary man-machine unity. As long as he had a thought, under the feedback of the BDI system, YF-21 would inevitably make the greatest response to restore the effective action to the maximum extent. He opened his hand and the wings unfolded. He clenched his fist, and the wings contracted. In this barren airspace, Ray Minkai seemed to have become a celestial with steel wings, wandering in this airspace wantonly. With a thought, YF-21's propulsion engine instantly erupted. The Mach ring suddenly appeared and quickly expanded behind YF-21 until it disappeared into the sky. So fast. Director Garrett. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai's acceleration data is now very close to yours. When YF-21 broke out at full speed, the staff responsible for monitoring the various data of YF-21 looked back at Garrett standing behind him in surprise. In this regard, Garrett just nodded. That indifferent expression almost made the staff subconsciously think that Ray Minkai was a human with Jetlati bloodline. As a matter of fact, Garrett's top speed record was very popular in the New Edward Flight Test Center. Compared to those shooting records, the most simple top speed record was the most straightforward symbol of strength. After all, Garrett relied on the excellent physique of the Jetlati people to maintain the record that made the pilots of the entire New Edward Flight Test Center look up to. Now, this record seemed to be about to be broken. 1, 1, 1, 3, 1, 5, 1, 8, 2, 0. The louder the counting sound made everyone stand up subconsciously and stare at the signal logo representing YF-21 on the main screen. Next to this logo, there was a set of rapidly changing coefficients. That was the coefficient called Mach. Obviously, what Ray Minkai had to do now was to squeeze out all the acceleration of YF-21. However, in this way, it seemed to deviate from the BDI system adjustment plan mentioned by Garrett before. But Garrett, as the person in charge, did not object to this. Everyone also quietly began to measure how fast Ray Minkai could reach when he boarded YF-21 for the first time. 2, 3, 2, 5. With a bang, the sound of the chair falling to the ground made Milad, who walked into the command center from outside, frowned slightly. What? That is? Milad, who was about to reprimand, smiled when he saw the rapidly moving logo on the main screen and the set of coefficients that changed with it. It's good to be young. Don't you think so? Director Garrett. Garrett heard the sound of Millard coming to the command center, but he didn't turn his head. He just nodded slightly as a form of greeting to Millard. After that, he focused on looking at the symbol representing YF-21. Milad was not angry about this. He knew that after the accident of YF-21, Garrett was more anxious than anyone else. Fortunately, YF-21's testing progress was unlikely to be too far behind. 3-0-3-1-0 right. Director Garrett. What was the record you held before? Milad glanced at his subordinates who were hiding in the corner and gesturing. He knew that these guys must be trying their luck on whether Ray Minkai could break Garrett's speed record. Well, it seems to be Mach 5.7. Garrett pondered for a moment, but it seemed that even he himself couldn't remember the speed record he had set back then. Mach 5.7? That's a good number. However, according to Director Garrett's strength, he should not have reached the limit yet, right? The physique of the Jetlati people was famous throughout the Milky Way. It's a meaningless competition. Garrett sneered at this, but he suddenly retorted, if Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai can break this record, then he will be the test pilot of YF-21. Ha ha! Milad glanced at Garrett's calm face, but in fact, his face was full of emotions. Then he smiled slightly. Then, let's wait and see. This was a sudden challenge. With the acquiescence of Milad and Garrett, the news that someone challenged Garrett's record was spread from the command center. In a blink of an eye, the real-time broadcast from the command center became the focus of the New Edward Flight Test Center. 4-0-0-0-0-0. At this moment, as long as you turned your head to look at the sky in the north of the New Edward Flight Test Center, you could see a straight white trajectory across the sky rapidly extending farther and deeper into the sky. The main character who drew this white trajectory in the sky was the focus of everyone's attention. Every breakthrough would become a cheer that resounded throughout the new Edward Flight Test Center. Faster! 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 The sky in front of them had become an indistinct blue, and the white clouds around YF-21 had become a blurry shadow that disappeared in a blink of an eye. With the continuous breakthroughs in speed, two of the three major obstacles in the flight of the aircraft, the sound barrier and the heat barrier, appeared one after another. The Mach ring that represented the breaking of the sound barrier had already dissipated behind YF-21, and the sparks that represented the arrival of the heat barrier were quietly approaching the nose of YF-21 at this moment. The strange thing was that the powerful G-force brought about by the YF-21's superspeed had far exceeded the limit that ordinary people could bear, but Lei Mingkai only felt a slight push from the acceleration at the beginning, then he didn't feel it anymore. This might be the effect of an auxiliary technology used in the helmet used by the YF-21 pilot. The earpads on this custom-made helmet could release a sound wave similar to alpha brainwaves. Under the influence of this sound wave, the pilot could obtain the greatest degree of relaxation. In a state of high concentration or even excitement, the pilot would not be affected by the strong negative effects caused by being shot and high-G maneuvers. Thus, the pilot could unleash the loudest combat power. Now, Lei Mingkai was able to feel nothing when the YF-21 challenged Mach 5. Perhaps it was because of this technology. In addition, it was worth mentioning that this technology could use sound wave stimulation to control and affect certain emotions, and the technology that also had this similar, or even came from the same development principle, was the dark history that almost led to the destruction of Earth's unification, serene. But this was a story for another day. Now, under the gaze of the new Edward Flight Test Center, YF-21, driven by Lei Mingkai, successfully broke through Mach 5. Above the sky, an extremely dazzling meteor appeared. 5, 1, 5, 2, 5, 3, it's close. It's close. Now, the history of the new Edward Flight Test Center was about to turn a new page. Everyone was focused on this historical moment. The results are coming out. Milad casually pulled out a chair and sat down. He was not as strong as Garrett, who was like a small mountain, and could stand there steadily without moving. As a veteran who retired from the frontline battlefield due to disability, Millard knew very well that he could not force himself now. 5, 5, the cheers suddenly sounded. At this moment, even if YF-21 and Lei Mingkai could not break the record set by Garrett, they had already received the recognition of the new Edward Flight Test Center. 5, 6, it's here. It's here. At this moment, the new Edward Flight Test Center was silent. It was so quiet that even the sound of breathing could not be heard. Only the sound of the wind passing through the desert outside could be heard. The next second, the deafening cheers suddenly flooded the new Edward Flight Test Center. 5, 7, 5, 8. Success. The record set by Garrett was broken by the newcomer Lei Mingkai. Moreover, it seemed that this was far from the limit. The meteor in the sky was still streaking across the sky, leaving its own trajectory in the sky of planet Eden. At this time, in the airspace near planet Eden, the light that represented the end of the FLOD transition disappeared in a flash. Life is really like a little girl that is hard to fathom. Planet Eden, New Edward Flight Test Center. I'm here. VF-11, who escaped from the FLOD transition, flew toward planet Eden amidst the cheers of its pilot. Not long after, VF-11, who came from afar, entered the atmosphere of planet Eden. However, before the VF-11 pilot could contact the new Edward Flight Test Center, a small black dot suddenly appeared on the horizon. Moreover, the speed of this small black dot was extremely fast. Before the VF-11 pilot could react, he had already flown past the VF-11 pilot. The huge airflow caused by it almost made the VF-11 lose control and plunge into the desert below. Fortunately, the VF-11 pilot reacted in time and managed to rescue the aircraft from the dangerous turbulence. What the hell is going on? That shadow is a body? Countless doubts surged in his mind. The VF-11 pilot kept switching the onboard radar, but he still could not find anything. In desperation, he could only choose to contact the New Edward Flight Test Center. New Edward! New Edward! This is Falcon 107. An unidentified aircraft just flew past District 7. Please verify the situation immediately. This is New Edward. Falcon 107. Welcome to the New Edward Flight Test Center. The aircraft that just flew past District 7 is our new body that just completed a flight around the world at Mach 6. Mach 6? Is the pilot crazy? Is this the power of a new body? Chapter 506. On that day, the meteor over Eden left a heavy mark on the record of the New Edward Flight Test Center. Although it had deviated from the purpose of the test, when the YF-21 landed and returned to the hangar, Ray Minkai was warmly welcomed. Among the crowd, the hill-like Garrett was particularly eye-catching. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, how do you feel? Garrett knew that the driving assistance system of the YF-21 could keep the pilot in a state of high G-force for a long time without being affected by it. However, since the development and manufacture of the YF-21, only Ray Minkai could fly around the world at high Mach for a long time. It feels good. If I didn't look at the meter, I wouldn't have believed that the YF-21 was in a state of Mach 6 just now. Ray Minkai took off his helmet, took a deep breath of the unique mechanical breath in the hangar, and smiled. This is a very good fighter, Director Garrett. I'm proud to be able to drive it into the blue sky. Ray Minkai's undisguised love for the YF-21 made Garrett's mouth curl up slightly. Really? Then, we have to prepare for the next test now. Come, Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. Our opponent is here. After that, Garrett turned and walked to the door, looking back and waiting for Ray Minkai to follow. Opponent, Ray Minkai said secretly. He couldn't help but recall the VF-11 he encountered when he flew around the world at the supersonic speed of Mach 6. Judging from the time and Garrett's reaction, the so-called opponent was probably the craziest pilot in the history of the ultra-spacetime fortress, Yong Dai Soon. Facing Madman Yong. This may be Ray Minkai's biggest challenge in history. However, neither of them spoke along the way and remained silent. Garrett no longer asked Ray Minkai's driving experience, and Ray Minkai was also thinking. The appearance of Madman Yong was the turning point for the entire incident to unfold. Recalling He Mimi's strange report about the fragment, Ray Minkai immediately set his sights on Sharon. It was an abnormal space-time fluctuation detected by the Space Administration from the endless void. The pattern of the abnormal space-time fluctuation was almost exactly the same as the pattern on the fragment that Ray Minkai had drawn when he handed it to the Ministry of Justice. In order to solve this puzzle, Ray Minkai and the White Cat State Zero came to this world. Meow! Suddenly, at the next corner, a small figure ran out. After shouting at Garrett, it jumped onto Ray Minkai's shoulder. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, your cat is very smart. Garrett's gaze moved slightly as he sized up the White Cat, State Zero. No, this is just a momentary inspiration. At other times, this little guy is just a foodie. Ray Minkai replied with a smile that was not a smile. As he spoke, the White Cat State Zero's claws quietly popped out, wanting to give Ray Minkai a fierce claw attack. But unexpectedly, Ray Minkai's driving suit that had not been changed at all blocked the White Cat State Zero's claws. The sturdy driving suit made the White Cat State Zero suddenly gnash its teeth in hatred. If it were not for the huge commotion, the White Cat State Zero would never let Ray Minkai go. We're here. Along the way, Garrett and Ray Minkai came to the conference room. Looking at the closed door, Ray Minkai seemed to be able to see who was sitting there, waiting for his arrival. "Come in." Colonel Millard's voice came from the door. Then, Ray Minkai saw two groups of people sitting at a long table arranged in a V shape. On the side near the door was the YF-21 development team led by Garrett, which was where Ray Minkai was now. On the opposite side, on the side near the floor-to-ceiling window, was the opponent of Garrett's team, the YF-19 development team led by Yang Nguyen. As the host of this meeting, Colonel Millard sat on the podium in front of the long table. What was worth Ray Minkai's attention was the man sitting next to the girl with long blonde hair tied into a ponytail and freckles on her face. Arrogant and unruly, this was Ray Minkai's first impression of him. Of course, this impression was also in line with Ray Minkai's memory of him. He was the craziest pilot among the many pilots in the ultra-spacetime stronghold. However, young Dyson did not notice Ray Minkai's gaze, but stared at Garrett next to Ray Minkai. Even if the two sides did not erupt into violent verbal attacks, anyone with a discerning eye could see how terrible the battle between the two sides was. "Hey! Isn't the physique of the Jetlati people the most powerful? Why is your right arm in a sling now? You look so sickly." Young Dyson's gaze moved down, and he obviously saw Garrett's right hand hanging on his chest. "I don't remember our new Edwards Flight Test Center having such a despicable pilot." To Ray Minkai's surprise, Garrett did not face young Dyson's verbal attack head-on, but looked calmly at Millard. "Well, Master Garrett, Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, please sit down. Let me introduce you." After Millard's gaze went back and forth between Garrett and young Dyson, he began to introduce young Dyson to everyone present. "This is young Dyson, who will be transferred to the new Edwards Flight Test Center starting today. According to the order, he is the opponent of YF-21 and the pilot of YF-19. On Garrett's side, except for Garrett and Ray Minkai who knew about it, everyone else looked at young Dyson in surprise. In the case of YF-19 losing at least 4 excellent pilots in a row, there was still a madman who came to serve as the test pilot of the unknown body. Humph. He's just a disobedient clown. He doesn't know what he's about to face? Garrett snorted coldly and unceremoniously ridiculed. "What? You bastard, dare to say it again?" Young Dyson, who was provoked on the spot, retorted loudly. "Humph. Yang Nguyen, didn't you tell this idiot how many pilots you've lost?" With that said, Garrett ignored young Dyson who was yelling on the side and looked at Millard instead. "Colonel, I think the outcome is now clear. Our test pilot of YF-21 is enough to demonstrate the performance of YF-21. In this case, YF-19 is no longer enough to continue the next step of the test mission." As soon as Garrett's words came out, everyone present, except for young Dyson, all looked at Ray Minkai. Just now, Ray Minkai, who completed the flight around the world at Mach 6 speed, didn't seem to have any abnormalities. It was as if the heavy burden from being in the high Mach state for a long time didn't exist at all. "This is troublesome." Yang Nguyen helplessly patted his head. The amazing performance of YF-21 just now had probably reached the ears of General Gomez, the highest person in charge of the Supernova project. Based on the current situation, the YF-19 project was probably going to be cut in half. "Colonel Millard, I just came here today. I haven't even been on YF-19. If I admit defeat like this, I won't accept it." Young Dyson would never admit that he had to accept the fate of failure when he just arrived. "Is that so? Lieutenant, before you came to the new Edward Flight Test Center, the data of YF-19 had a rough model. Compared to our YF-21, the difference is not just a little bit." Garrett unceremoniously used facts to rub young Dyson on the ground. "What? You bastard! Shut up! Shut up!" Just when young Dyson was about to persuade him, Millard shouted and stopped the meeting that was about to go out of control. At the same time, the phone rang. "Yes. I'm Millard, please speak." It seemed to be the eve of the announcement of the supernova project. Looking at Millard, who was holding the microphone and listening to the voice from the other side, everyone couldn't help but shut their mouths and wait for the arrival of fate. "TSK. Guy, you have to continue." In this silence, the white cat's ears moved slightly and said such a sentence in Ray Minkai's mind. But Ray Minkai wasn't surprised by this. "Is that so? Then, the good show here will continue to play out. It's also a very good result." Through the white cat's retelling, Ray Minkai knew that the person on the other side of the phone must be the highest person in charge of the supernova project, General Gomez. The reason why he suppressed the stunning performance of YF-21 just now and chose to continue the competition between YF-19 and YF-21 was probably because of a project hidden behind the supernova project, Ghost X9. Perhaps it was also one of the biggest obstacles in Ray Minkai's mission this time. The microphone was gradually put down, and Millard's gaze was also raised. He slowly looked around the crowd from left to right, and from right to left. He looked at the seemingly calm faces, but in fact they were extremely nervous. After a long time, Millard slowly opened his mouth. The call just now was from General Gomez. He announced that the supernova project will continue. In addition, he specifically asked me to tell the YF-21 team, Director Garrett, and Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. The final result of an excellent fighter will not be determined by the data of a certain specialty. Garrett and Ray Minkai looked at each other. After realizing that the other was not surprised by this, they responded in unison to Millard's words. "Understood, Colonel Millard." In the next second, the personnel on Yang Nguyen's and Yong Dyson's side suddenly cheered. However, Millard's light words brought them back to their original state. "Director Yang Nguyen, First Lieutenant Yong Dyson, now that the airframe is being returned to the factory for maintenance, you can only temporarily serve as the mission monitoring for the YF-21 team. Believe me, only by fully understanding the opponent can you defeat the opponent." After that, Millard put his hands on the table, slowly stood up, and announced the dismissal of the meeting. The people who left behind Millard were Garrett and Ray Minkai's side. "Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. Be careful of him, he's a very difficult opponent." After leaving the conference room and disbanding, Garrett invited Ray Minkai to his room. "Yes, I know. Director Garrett. No one would treat a 3-time Roy Foca Medal winner as a good-for-nothing idiot." Perhaps intentionally, Ray Minkai said something that Garrett did not know. "What? 3-time Roy Foca?" Although Garrett did not join Earth Unification, he also knew what the Roy Foca Medal represented. In the end, even if there were more words, Garrett could only turn them into a sentence to remind Ray Minkai. "Please, Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. Whether it's for me, for our team, for YF-21, you must defeat Yong Dyson. I know. This is also the reason why I'm standing here. Director Garrett. Thank you. I should have been the one to do it." Garrett sighed slowly. "Okay. I believe you're tired from today's flight. Go back and rest first. Next, our testing progress should be faster. Then, see you tomorrow, Director Garrett." The next day, Ray Minkai once again changed into YF-21's special pilot suit and stood in front of YF-21, waiting for the boarding notice from the crew. And White Cat State Zero squatted obediently at Ray Minkai's feet. "Kai. That man is coming." When the White Cat State Zero's voice sounded in Ray Minkai's mind, Ray Minkai also found a figure standing at the gate of YF-21's hangar looking around. There was no doubt that this man was Yong Dyson. Fortunately, today's test mission of YF-21 did not require a wingman to observe, so Yong Dyson also had some free time to run here and look around. But unfortunately, in order to understand Yong Dyson's technical level, Yong Dyson had to sit in the stroller, like a baby, and be tormented by Yang Nguyen and others. "Hey! Over there!" White Cat State 0 looked back at the man standing at the gate, but was blocked by the staff of YF-21 team and could not get close. Suddenly, young Dyson, who was blocked by the staff, seemed to see White Cat State 0 looking at him. Immediately, he waved his hand and shouted, "Kitty! White Kitty! Hurry up and call your master for me." Little did he know that such a sentence immediately angered White Cat State 0. It hated being called a kitty the most. Roar! As soon as it turned around and moved its four limbs, White Cat State 0 turned into an afterimage and rushed in front of young Dyson. Clang! Its sharp claws popped out, and in a flash, young Dyson's face was suddenly covered with countless scars. The surrounding staff were silent for a while, and then a deafening sound broke out. "Ha ha 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 ha! What's going on?" Hearing the sound, Garnet came over and glanced at young Dyson, whose face was covered with scars. His face was distorted, but he quickly controlled his expression. "Isn't this Lieutenant Young Dyson? What brings you to our hangar?" Young Dyson gritted his teeth and looked down at the white cat that was still baring its fangs at him. He immediately turned around and left. No matter how much young Dyson ran amok, he probably could not be so heartless as to argue with a white cat, right? Looking at young Dyson's angry, but unable to do anything, Garnet shook his head helplessly. After dispersing everyone, he reached out and carried the White Cat State 0, whose fur was standing on end. Okay. He's not a bad person. He's just curious about our YF-21 team. Director, did State 0 cause trouble? Ray Minkai, who finally sensed that something was wrong, turned around and looked at Garnet, who was carrying the White Cat State 0. No, it's just that your cat was frightened. Okay. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, continue your mission. State 0, let me take care of it. Okay. However, Garnet did not know that at that moment, Ray Minkai and the White Cat State 0 exchanged glances. The White Cat State 0's eyes were full of pride. Chapter 507. The eagle soaring in the blue sky eventually had to return to its nest. YF-21, which had been flying recklessly in the blue sky for half a day, finally landed slowly on the third runway of the new Edward Flight Test Center under the driving of Ray Minkai. At the same time, the staff, who had already been prepared, swarmed up and surrounded YF-21, which had just walked down from the runway and stopped in the designated position. Among them, two staff members put a simple ladder next to the cockpit of YF-21, swiftly climbed on both sides of YF-21's cockpit, and removed the slightly cumbersome BDI system pilot's suit for Ray Minkai. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. The current stage of the test mission is over. The next mission is to perform a 24-hour maintenance on the YF-21 before continuing. Garrett, who stood next to YF-21, looked at Ray Minkai, who slowly walked down from YF-21 with the assistance of the staff, and said, In other words, I have a short vacation now? Ray Minkai asked while moving his hands. In theory, yes. In fact, the unknown signal just now really concerned me. Without figuring out why this unknown signal appeared, I'm afraid I can't let Second Lieutenant and YF-21 take off rashly. Garrett's words made Ray Minkai nod. Half an hour ago, when YF-21, which had just completed all the test missions, was preparing to return under the driving of Ray Minkai, an unknown signal suddenly broke into YF-21's communication channel. Of course, this unknown phenomenon was naturally immediately reported to the new Edward Flight Test Center by Ray Minkai. However, after the new Edward Flight Test Center quickly searched the nearby airspace, and even after the signal channel of the Earth Unified Army station nearby, they still couldn't find the source of this unknown signal. Under the confusion, everyone's heart couldn't help but hang in suspense. Although, from the current situation, YF-21 was not affected by this unknown signal. But neither Millard nor Garrett dared to take the risk. So, after the two quickly communicated, they made the decision to let Ray Minkai and YF-21 return. Then, I'll take this opportunity to buy some cat food for State Zero. Ray Minkai said so, but he hid something in his heart. Although the new Edward Flight Test Center couldn't figure out the source of the unknown signal, Ray Minkai felt that he seemed to have touched on something. Now, Garrett said that it would take at least 24 hours to carry out the next flight test, so Ray Minkai just took advantage of the situation. White Cat State Zero walked over from the side, and jumped on Ray Minkai's shoulder as usual, waiting for Ray Minkai's next move. Obviously, State White Cat Zero also knew what the unknown signal meant. Well, there should be a second lieutenant. Lieutenant, you report to Colonel Millard, and you're on your way. Leave this to me. Understood. Half an hour later, a car drove out of the new Edward Flight Test Center on the highway to the city. White Cat State Zero, sitting in the passenger seat, raised its head and looked at the windshield in front, then stretched out its right paw and pressed the window button next to the passenger seat. Hoola! In an instant, the cool wind blowing in from the open window suddenly made White Cat State Zero squint its eyes slightly, and even its furry tail shook involuntarily. It was as if he was enjoying the cool breeze. Ray Minkai, who was holding the steering wheel with both hands, glanced at White Cat State Zero. State Zero, tell me what happened just now. White Cat State Zero's ears perked up, and it looked over. Just now? That unknown signal? Kai, what did you hear? It seemed like someone was calling my name. In that chaotic noise I heard my name. Really? I didn't hear anything here. It was just some noise. It was no different from what the new Edward Flight Test Center monitored. So, Kai, do you know what this means? The result obtained by White Cat State Zero was no different from the result obtained by the new Edward Flight Test Center. But in the face of this result, Ray Minkai heard someone calling out to him. Due to this anomaly, White Cat State Zero targeted Ray Minkai. You're saying that someone is watching me? The people from the Destiny Council? Ray Minkai's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel, and his gaze became much colder. No, I'm not sure about this. However, one thing he knew was that someone had sensed his presence and was calling out to him. This point is very clear. White Cat State Zero stretched out its hands, laid on the dashboard, and stretched its neck to look at the fast traffic on the highway ahead. Suddenly, White Cat State Zero's eyes flashed, and it raised its head to look at the screen projected on the roadside lamppost. Kai, look. Don't you feel a sense of familiarity? Ray Minkai heard it and looked over. At the same time, a burst of music was transmitted to Ray Minkai's ears. At this moment, Ray Minkai's thoughts suddenly turned upside down along with the music that entered his ears. Sharon. There was no doubt. When Ray Minkai heard the music and saw the pattern on the projection screen on the lamppost, he knew that this was the world's most popular virtual singer, Sharon Epp. However, in the midst of this familiar music, Ray Minkai heard a melody that he had just heard not too long ago. Victoria Consort. Yes. The melody hidden in Sharon Epp's music was Victoria Consort's singing that caused Ray Minkai to go berserk. However, although the music did not cause Ray Minkai to go berserk, it had set off thousands of waves in Ray Minkai's heart. Victoria, Ray Minkai's hands turned, and the car he was driving sped up, overtaking the truck in front, and continued to accelerate towards the city where some buildings could already be seen. Kai, do you have any ideas? White Cat State Zero sat back in the passenger seat, reached out to close the window, and asked Ray Minkai. Some. But I need to go to the city to know. Ray Minkai did have some ideas in his heart, but he still needed to go to the city to confirm it. For some reason, the closer they got to the city, the stronger the inexplicable feeling in Ray Minkai's heart. It was as if there was something in front of him that was calling him. They sped all the way. The closer they got to the city, the clearer Sharon's singing became. Who is this woman? He seemed to be very popular. Consort? Or queen? White Cat State Zero's ears trembled as it looked at the colorful holographic projection in front of it. No, she is not human. State Zero. If I must say, she should be considered as a kind of electronic life form. It's just that she's still far from reaching that level. Electronic life form? Is she the little girl's sister? White Cat State Zero originally wanted to use its own case for comparison, but when it thought of the fact that it could only be considered as a metal life form, it changed its words to another case. And this case was undoubtedly Hinana, the only person White Cat State Zero had contact with. According to its own words, Hinana could indeed be considered as a kind of electronic life form. No, it has not reached that level. The current Sharon Ep should only be a kind of electronic program, but its intelligence equation has far surpassed its kind. The car had already driven into the city while Ray Minkai and White Cat State Zero were talking. The surrounding scenery changed from the flat plains and the uneven mountain peaks in the distance to the forest of buildings and colorful holographic projections, as well as the people coming and going. White Cat State Zero turned around and leaned against the window, looking at the people coming and going around, and narrowed its eyes slightly. From its vision, it seemed to be able to see a trace of an unusual scene. Every time the cross formed by the two iron chains intertwined in the shape of a cone appeared, among the pedestrians, there would always be a few pedestrians who stopped to watch, and showed a trace of fanaticism. Even when the pedestrians were crossing the road, there were a few who stopped at the zebra crossing in the midst of Sharon Epps singing, and did not care about the dangerous situation they were in. This electronic life form is more dangerous than Princess Victoria. White Cat State Zero's eyes were full of solemnity. Although Princess Victoria's singing could stir people's hearts, based on what White Cat State Zero had witnessed, Victoria's singing was far inferior to this electronic life form named Sharon Ep. Ray Minkai did not answer, but turned the car into the central area of the city, which was the central island of the Atlantis Stadium where Sharon Epps' Galaxy Tour concert was held. To clear the doubts in his heart, he was afraid that he would only be able to obtain clues by going to the scene personally. However, the idea was beautiful, but the reality was cruel. Even if Ray Minkai understood what was going to happen next, he still underestimated Sharon Epps' influence. The car that he was driving had just driven down the bridge, and it was blocked by the turbulent flow of people. What a bewitching witch! The speed of the car was hindered by the flow of people, and it had to slow down. Ray Minkai looked left and right, and found that it would be difficult to even open the car door, let alone move forward. The only feasible way was to quickly retreat before the flow of people completely closed in. In the end, Ray Minkai chose this method, and drove the car to the other side, where there were fewer people. Looking at the crowd that gathered from all directions, he shook his head helplessly. Sharon Ep is indeed worthy of her name. This terrifying scene is indeed beyond my expectations. Sharon Epps' concert would begin 3 days later, but those fans had been waiting outside the Atlantis Stadium since it should be said that they had been waiting outside the Atlantis Stadium since even earlier, waiting to meet with Sharon Ep. Stupid human beings. Why are they addicted to the illusory singing? White Cat State Zero shook its head, and its tone was full of disdain. Life is too difficult. They are just looking for solace that can comfort their own souls. Let's go. The idea of getting close to the Atlantis Stadium was obviously impossible. In that case, there was only one place where he could obtain information about Sharon Ep. Star Hill. Originally, Ray Minkai did not want to get involved in the love triangle between Yong Dyson, Garnet, and Mei Wang. But now, it seemed that they were related to Sharon Ep, and the only people that Ray Minkai could come into contact with at the moment were them. And inside the Atlantis Stadium, among the staff who were nervously preparing for the 3-day concert, there was a woman in a red office lady with shoulder-length black hair. She was holding a paper cup and standing in front of the debugging desk. While looking at the brain projection in front of her, she was talking to the programmer next to her. She was Mei Weng Fong Long. She was also the female lead in this Sharon Ep incident. Miss Mei Weng, the preparations are done. You can go and rest first. A man appeared on the platform above. He was the person in charge of Sharon Ep's plan, Matthew. Looking down at Mei Weng condescendingly, Matthew smiled and said that the 2 staff members who offended Mei Weng were fired. However, Mei Weng did not thank him. Instead, Mei Weng replied coldly and turned to leave. But just as Mei Weng left the stadium and came to the passage leading to the exit, she suddenly saw a shadow flashing by at the turn in front. Who is it? Now that the entire Atlantis had become Sharon Ep's home ground, there was no one else except the staff who served Sharon Ep. Not to mention that during this tense working hours, there would be people wandering around in the passage. Mei Weng's shouts kept echoing in the passage, but they didn't draw out a single shadow. Mei Weng stood in the passage and frowned slightly. Is it an illusion? The silence in the depths of the passage made Mei Weng wonder if he was too tired. Puzzled, Mei Weng stepped forward again. However, before he could walk far, a strange feeling suddenly swept over him from behind. In an instant, Mei Weng's nerves were tense, and the hair on her back stood straight. Death was so close to Mei Weng at this moment. He's here. My knight. As the laughter sounded, the death scythe hanging on Mei Weng's neck quietly disappeared, as if the scene just now had never happened. Who is it? Extremely nervous, Mei Weng suddenly turned around and looked behind her. There was nothing there. There was only a white shadow passing by the corner of Mei Weng's eyes. Who the hell is it? Come out! Mei Weng's voice echoed in the passage. The coldness and the experience of death at that moment deeply pierced Mei Weng's heart, causing her voice and even her body to tremble. What happened? Who the hell is it, Miss Mei Weng? Hearing the noise, the security guard broke open the door and rushed over, and saw Mei Weng in a panic. No, it's nothing. Mei Weng looked at the nervous security personnel, and just shook his head. After that, he ignored the security personnel and walked out of the Atlantis Stadium. He then got into the taxi arranged by Matthew. Let's go to Star Hill. Even sitting in the warm taxi, Mei Weng's body was still trembling. The scene just now made Mei Weng subconsciously choose to go to the most profound place in her memory. Chapter 508. Star Hill. In the rapidly developing city of Eden, a hill with a large windmill generator array was indeed a rare sight. Looking from Star Hill, one could see the rapidly developing city that firmly engraved the traces of mankind on this planet. There's nothing here. White Cat State Zero stood under the windmill and turned its head to look at the hill where there were only 2 or 3 people other than the windmill. Don't be impatient. The person we're waiting for hasn't arrived yet. Ray Minkai patted White Cat State Zero's head and looked back at the path leading to the observation deck. Sure enough, not long after, a tall and sturdy figure that was like a small mountain slowly walked up from the foot of the mountain. Big guy, why is he here? White Cat State Zero's eyes were sharp and immediately recognized that the figure was Garrett. Of course, he's here to catch up. Ray Minkai looked around and couldn't help but sigh. The world was indeed moving forward according to the established pace. Garrett stood on the observation deck and watched the sun gradually sink into the sea silently. On the other side, a red figure appeared. However, even from a distance, Ray Minkai could see that the woman's situation was not very good. She seemed to be tired? Ray Minkai's brows gradually wrinkled. A woman in red who came to Star Hill alone at this time, her identity was almost certain. However, in Ray Minkai's memory, the woman's condition seemed to have exceeded Ray Minkai's expectations. No. Kai. There's something strange about that woman. White Cat State Zero was stunned at first, then a cold light suddenly appeared in its eyes and it almost rushed out. If Ray Minkai hadn't reached out to hold down White Cat State Zero in time, the woman would have been injured by White Cat State Zero. Calm down, State Zero. She's not an enemy. White Cat State Zero's reaction undoubtedly confirmed Ray Minkai's guess. Sharon Epp is odd. Otherwise, as Sharon Epp's emotional provider, that woman, Mei Weng Fong Long, would not have caused the white cat to have such a big reaction. Woo! After a few low growls, the White Cat State Zero gradually relaxed its body and squatted down again. Kai, you want to get information from that woman? Ray Minkai's eyes followed Mei Weng's movements from afar. It wasn't until she stood on the observation deck and looked at the setting sun in the distance that he withdrew his gaze. Maybe, but I'm not sure. After a pause, Ray Minkai continued. If that unknown signal is really related to her, then are we being monitored the moment we entered this city? All of a sudden, the fur on the white cat's body stood on end. Obviously, Ray Minkai's words gave the white cat a sense of crisis. If what Lei Minkai said was true, that they were being monitored by someone hiding in the dark the moment they entered the city, it would mean that they were being watched by someone in the dark. Calm down. State Zero. In fact, this is just my speculation. While Ray Minkai and the White Cat State Zero were discussing the current situation, Mei Weng and Garrett had already reunited on the observation deck below. Mei Weng was surprised and saw Garrett's right hand hanging in front of his chest. Garrett, your right hand? Garrett looked down at his right hand and shook his head slightly. It's just a problem at work. How could it be? Now, your right hand. Ray Minkai secretly shook his head as he watched the worried Mei Weng go up and check on Garrett with concern. If there were no accidents, the last character of the melodramatic plot, Yong Dai-sun, would appear in a while. However, Ray Minkai could not witness the melodramatic development with his own eyes. Because, the moment Yong Dai-sun appeared, Ray Minkai suddenly felt a strange feeling in his heart. Someone is spying on us. The White Cat State Zero reacted faster than Ray Minkai and rushed out towards the dense forest behind the large group of windmills. Following closely behind was Ray Minkai, who turned and ran after seeing the sparks of the melodramatic quartet. The closer he got to the edge of the trees, the stronger the strange feeling in Ray Minkai's heart. It was as if someone was calling out to him. That feeling was almost the same as the messy unknown signal that appeared on YF-21's communication channel. Sha. State White Cat Zero, who was rushing in front, suddenly disappeared into the forest. State Zero. Be careful. Ray Minkai almost stopped the moment the White Cat State Zero rushed into the forest. However, in the next second, Ray Minkai still followed behind the White Cat State Zero and stepped into the strange forest. Sha. The sound of branches being pulled apart and leaves swaying back and forth could be heard. The rustling sound of broken branches and leaves under his feet could be heard. It seemed to be intertwined into a special melody at this moment, which rang in Ray Minkai's ears for a long time. In front of him, between the dense branches and leaves, the figure of the White Cat State Zero was faintly discernible. State Zero. Be careful. When Ray Minkai forcefully pushed aside the leaves in front of him, a white light suddenly lit up in front of him. Then, Ray Minkai's vision turned black and he lost his perception of the outside world. At this moment, on the other side of time and space, Euphemia was accompanied by her royal sister, Cornelia, to the Space Administration. Yesterday, she received an invitation from the Ministry of Justice, Shi Hui, who said that there were some matters that required her to go personally. Welcome to my laboratory. Yes, Her Majesty Euphemia is also a frequent visitor. As for Madame Cornelia, this is also her first time here. Come, please sit here. In the past, Shi Hui, who had never left her hand without a chocolate bar, held a document with both hands. Looking at her, these documents seemed to be for Euphemia. Doctor, what are these documents for? Cornelia took the initiative to ask. Yes, this is the analysis report on the fragment that Ray Minkai gave me previously. Shi Hui pushed the thick stack of documents in front of Euphemia, but did not signal for Euphemia to open it. Instead, she asked Euphemia and Cornelia a question. Her Majesty Euphemia, Madame Cornelia, how much do you know about souls? Souls? Euphemia and Cornelia were stunned. Although they seemed to have an answer in their hearts, they could not say it out loud. As for their reaction, Shi Hui seemed to have expected it. She reached into her pocket and took out a box of chocolate bars. She took out a chocolate bar, but did not bite off a single piece. Instead, she used it as a baton and waved it back and forth as she spoke. Souls. In ancient times, and even in some modern civilizations, they have a special meaning. Civilizations and races that have a special understanding of souls believe that when life ushers in their final destiny, the life experiences and accumulated experiences will all become the light that guides the soul to the next life. Suddenly, Shi Hui, who was talking cheerfully, saw the confused expressions on Euphemia and Cornelia's faces. She immediately coughed a few times to cover up her gaffe. Ahem. I accidentally digressed. In general, compared to these civilizations that see souls as nothing and worship them on a platform, we have a different view. In the universe we live in, there are countless elite scientists. With their hard work, we finally saw through the mystery of the soul. Instead of seeing souls as something intangible, it is better to see them as pieces of data that contain the memories of special life forms. Speaking of this, Shi Hui asked Euphemia a question. Her Majesty Euphemia, I believe that before you fainted, you must have seen something. And these things you didn't tell Rei Minkai, right? He didn't expect that Shi Hui of the Ministry of Justice would be able to expose Euphemia so quickly that even Lei Minkai couldn't discover it. Euphemia's eyes first panicked, but she gradually calmed down. UFFI, did you really see something? Cornelia was very clear about Euphemia's previous coma, but after seeing Euphemia return to the Britannia Empire, Cornelia suppressed the uneasiness in her heart. Now, these uneasiness had been stirred up by the moment of panic of Shi Hui and Euphemia from the Ministry of Justice. In her nervousness, Cornelia also forgot the etiquette that she had always followed. Euphemia lowered her gaze, was silent for a while, and then slowly nodded. Yes, I did see something. It was an image that I've never seen before. In it, I saw Kai standing on a platform built on the clouds with a girl who had the same hair color as me. That's you? UFFI. Euphemia turned around and looked at her royal sister, whose eyes were full of concern, and shook her head slightly. That's not me. It's a woman I've never seen before. Also, in that image, Kai seemed to be very close to her. I'll become his land and he'll become my land? Just as Euphemia finished speaking, Shi Hui followed up with a sentence that surprised Euphemia. This is what the girl said to Kai at the end of the image. Shi Hui of the Ministry of Justice sighed. As expected, this was a noble, pure, and at the same time, a vow that would accompany him for life and would never change until death. According to the relevant records of Xingyao City, this oath shouldn't appear in the world where Rei Minkai came from, where there are mechanical beasts everywhere. However, Shi Hui didn't want to dwell on this issue, and continued the previous topic. Your Majesty Euphemia, the image you saw came from someone else's memory, and the carrier of this memory is this fragment. Euphemia looked at the shard that Shi Hui of the Ministry of Justice had taken out from her pocket and was silent. Cornelia, on the other hand, keenly captured the key point. Doctor, the soul you mentioned before is in this fragment? Yes and no. If this fragment really contains a soul, which means that it has the characteristics of a special life form's memory, then the current Your Majesty Euphemia, I'm afraid, become a second person? Before Shi Hui finished speaking, Euphemia suddenly spoke. Furthermore, from the look on her face, she seemed to have seen through something incredible. Shi Hui shook the chocolate bar in her hand. Yes and no. What kind of person you will become depends on your composition. Composition? Euphemia and Cornelia said in unison. Yes. For example, the chocolate bar in my hand is the original flavor. Sure, Hui gestured at the chocolate bar in her hand. If I add some strawberries into this chocolate bar, it will become a strawberry-flavored chocolate bar. But if I'm still not satisfied, should I do it now? Add more. This was an obvious answer. However, Euphemia had already seen the final answer. Doctor, how many fragments are there in my body now? Not more, not less, exactly 20. The Ministry of Justice's Sure Hui nodded, admiring Euphemia's intuition. In other words, I'm still me. Yes. The current Your Majesty Euphemia is still Your Majesty Euphemia. Sure Hui's expression suddenly became solemn. However, the enemy Rei Minkai is facing now is probably a very difficult person to deal with. In the depths of the forest, there was a beautiful and calm lake. However, the peace of the past had been shattered. The gigantic, ferocious steel lion, whose steel body was covered with sharp blades, was roaring angrily in a low voice. The terrifying roar swept across the surface of the lake, causing ripples. The fishes in the water were so frightened that they swam towards the bottom of the lake, afraid of their deaths. Passing through the forest, it caused a wave of animals to flee. In the sky, birds were flapping their wings in panic and flying everywhere. However, such a terrifying roar could not scare off the white figure confronting the ferocious steel lion. The sun had already set. In the forest that was gradually covered by darkness, the white figure seemed to have become the sun that lit up the forest. The place where she stood was filled with radiance. But behind this radiance, the steel lion became more and more cautious. Because there was a person standing behind the steel lion. He was Rei Minkai, who had lost his consciousness and was standing there in a daze. State 0, you are still as irritable as before. The white figure looked past the steel lion and landed on Rei Minkai, who was standing motionlessly by the lake. Come here, my knight. I am here. Roar. Don't even think about it. A roar tore apart the darkness that descended over the forest and tore the white figure into pieces in the next moment. However, the white figure did not disappear. Instead, she appeared in front of the steel lion again. State 0. Do not obstruct me. I am just a knight who called me, a knight who made a vow with me. Shut up. You are not her at all. You are just a meaningless computer program. Ah. Suddenly, a scream rushed out from the white figure's mouth and forced the steel lion to take a step back. So noisy. The steel lion had just stabilized its footsteps when Rei Minkai's voice was heard. Kai, you are awake? State 0 turned his head in surprise and looked behind him. Rei Minkai, who was originally standing there in a daze, was shaking his head to clear his mind. His gaze became colder as he looked at the white figure in front of him. You are not her. Vervian, Note 1, is already dead. Sharon Ep. Chapter 509. A noisy wind. A low roar. Thousands of steel beasts lined up in a large square formation, waiting for a certain moment to arrive. On the other hand, the owners of these huge steel beasts all had young and immature faces. 18? No. Among these people who tried their best to straighten their backs and stand in front of their steel beasts, there were too many immature faces, so immature that the commander standing on the command platform couldn't bear to see them. However, this was something that couldn't be helped. The abyss had already swallowed more than half of the Empire's territory. Every time a place was swallowed, whether it was people, animals, or steel machines, they would all turn into nothingness and cease to exist. This was not a war between countries. Instead, it was a final war that would usher in the disaster of the entire civilization as long as they failed. In the face of this war, everything was illusory. The only reality left was how to let the civilization and the race struggle under this disaster. And in the square formation below, a young man was looking around with an inquisitive gaze. Is this the day when the Abyss Crusade army set off? The owner of that pair of inquisitive eyes was Ray Minkai. He remembered that not long ago, he was still in a certain forest on planet Eden, but now he was in this scene that Ray Minkai could recall at a glance. The Abyss Crusade Army. This was the only counterattack army formed by the Empire after the fall of Sanguwu City. And the members of the army were made up of the survivors who had evacuated from Sanguwu City to the imperial capital. This was a cruel decision. However, it had nothing to do with Ray Minkai, because the world that used to be had been destroyed. Moreover, the moment Ray Minkai turned around to look behind him, a beautiful figure was standing there, quietly looking at Ray Minkai. That long pink hair fluttering in the wind. That beautiful face with a sweet smile. And that pair of eyes that would become gentle and stagnant every time they fell on Ray Minkai. They were all telling Ray Minkai one thing. She was still waiting for Ray Minkai. However, the figure waiting for Ray Minkai's return quietly shattered in the next moment, turning into streams of light that dissipated before Ray Minkai's eyes. This was not an accident. Ray Minkai had seen through the nature of this world from the very beginning. Enough. Sharon, it's not her. Vivian was dead. That's right. In the battle of the imperial capital, Princess Vivian had already died for her country. As Ray Minkai's cold voice rang out from his throat, the world suddenly shattered. Then, Ray Minkai's eyes lit up as he saw the long Fong lion confronting a white figure. So noisy! Ray Minkai looked up and stared at the white figure in front of him. Sharon Epp. You're not her. Don't try to trick me with this trick. Ray Minkai stepped on the grass under his feet and came to the feet of the long Fong lion, staring coldly at the white figure in front of him. As Ray Minkai's cold voice sounded, the white figure showed obvious fluctuations, as if it was constantly shaking like a projection that was disturbed by some kind of interference. What are you talking about? My knight. I'm waiting for you here. Waiting for your return. The white figure stretched out his right hand and issued an invitation to Ray Minkai. But Ray Minkai was still unmoved. He knew that the white figure in front of him was not the person who had died long ago, but for some reason had memories of Ray Minkai. Kai fragments. She has fragments. The long Fong lion lowered its huge head, confirming Ray Minkai's speculation. Ray Minkai closed his eyes, nodded, and then shouted. Sharon Epp, you're just a cold program written by humans. You are not anyone at all. Ray Minkai's cold eyes and sharp words suddenly made the white figure retreat. The fluctuations that constantly appeared on her body madly distorted the illusory figure. No. I am. When she dissipated, she still did not forget to stretch out her right hand to Ray Minkai. My knight. I am right here. The two unique big and small moons of Eden gradually rose into the night sky, scattering the moonlight on the lakeside, scattering on the position where the white figure was. Kai. Under the moonlight, the long Fong lion turned back into a white cat in the blink of an eye, and jumped on Ray Minkai's shoulder. Do you remember her? Ray Minkai was silent for a moment and nodded. Yes. Princess Vermilion Li Cenabas, the person I once vowed to protect. The name that he once forgot, quietly remembered in the illusion created by Sharon just now. That name had never left Ray Minkai's heart, but at some point it was drowned by some things, some power. Princess Vermilion. My former master. I didn't expect to meet her in such a way. The white cat's face also showed a trace of nostalgia, but more of it was self-deprecating. No, she is not Vermilion. It's just a computer program with her memory. Ray Minkai's gaze paused on the grass in front of him that was illuminated by the moonlight, and then turned to leave the lake. Memory. The white cat was silent for a moment and shook its head slightly. It seems that the fragment we are going to recover this time is Vermilion's memory? Or is it her soul? If it was just a memory, it would not be able to make Sharon Epp do that kind of action. Although it looked like an invitation between humans, Kai's gradually recovering memory of Soth's mechanical beast world told him that it was a unique way of communication between him and Princess Vermilion. Sharon, has your biochip been replaced with a fragment of your home world? Kai reached out and touched the pocket in front of his chest. The chip that he got from Invincible East was quietly sitting there. State 0, when we go back, help me do something. And Kai's memory of the new Edward Flight Test Center kept appearing in his mind. He remembered that in the hangar next to YF-21 and YF-19, there was one of the most important factors in Sharon's incident. Ghost X9. Listening to Kai's explanation, the White Cat's eyes flashed, and it agreed to Kai's arrangement. The next day, everything was the same. Whether it was Kai, Garrett, Young Dyson, and the others who had experienced a melodramatic plot, they all acted according to their daily arrangements. The sky above the new Edward Flight Test Center was still busy. However, under this bustle, he was in an extremely tense state of work. In the command center, Garrett and Millard stood on the side and looked at the main screen in front of them. It was a tracking camera installed on the three wingmen. With the help of these tracking cameras, the new Edward Flight Test Center could see what was about to happen. It was a test of YF-21's maneuverability. After YF-21 entered the test airspace, the drone cluster that took off first would lock onto YF-21 and launch at least 100 air-to-air missiles. Of course, this seemingly terrifying sea of air-to-air missiles was just a simulated missile. Even if YF-21 was hit, it was just a false alarm. It could not cause any damage to YF-21. Director Garrett, it's about to start. Millard glanced at the time, then turned back to look at Garrett, who was calm. Well, let's start. I have confidence in Second Lieutenant Kai. Garrett nodded, indicating that there was no problem. Millard nodded, raised his hand and waved gently. The CIC, who had been on standby for a long time, immediately sent a message to YF-21 that had entered the scheduled airspace. Control tower calling Omega-1. In the operation area, all Klesser. The atmosphere is good. Roger. Kai, who was sitting in the cockpit of YF-21, closed his eyes slightly and allowed his brain to fully integrate with the BDI system. Just at this moment, Kai's heart raised a trace of concern. But this trace of concern just appeared, it was erased by Kai. There is no if. If Sharon really wants to appear, the new Edward Flight Test Center will not be able to find her at all. Everything will proceed as usual. Pursuer number 1. Understood. When Young Dyson's voice sounded in the communication, a shadow appeared in the sky above YF-21. That was VF-11 with a tracking camera installed. Its belly was facing the sky, and its back was facing down. After slowly flying over YF-21's head at a very close distance, it suddenly rolled 5 times to the left, and gradually entered its original position. This VF-11, who made such a bold maneuver, must be Young Dyson, who was called a lunatic. Unfortunately, the one sitting in YF-21 now was not Garrett, but Kai. Kai, who knew Young Dyson very well, would not be frightened by Young Dyson's crazy maneuver. Omega-1 calling the control tower, has reached the scheduled airspace, can start at any time. Hearing Kai's call, Young Dyson was stunned for a moment. The maneuver just now was almost provocative, but the other party did not react at all. What a boring guy. However, this new model looks good. Under Young Dyson's scrutinizing gaze, Kai's thoughts moved slightly, and the YF-21 accelerated and rushed out a large distance. Naturally, the moment YF-21 turned on the acceleration, the turbulence caused by breaking through the sound barrier immediately made Young Dyson, who was following behind, tightly grip the control stick in his hand. He stabilized his body and tried to offset the aftermath caused by the turbulence caused by YF-21 as much as possible. TSK. I thought it was a boring guy. Isn't this very interesting? Young Dyson raised the corner of his mouth, and his left hand pushed fiercely. The rocket-propelled backpack carried by VF-11 was suddenly activated. In the midst of the gushing flames, VF-11, named Pursuer No. 1, rushed out of the formation in the blink of an eye and chased closely behind YF-21. Pursuer No. 1. Come back. You just need to prepare the tracking camera. As soon as the VF-11 driven by Young Dyson suddenly rushed out of the formation, a small commotion suddenly occurred in the command center. Humph! How can such a reckless pilot fully utilize the performance of the body? Garrett frowned slightly and mercilessly belittled brave Dyson. Indeed, Young Dyson's sudden unauthorized action, no matter who was watching, would leave a very bad impression. The same was true for Colonel Millard. However, he did not immediately issue a recall order or terminate the order. Instead, he chose to continue to observe the situation. In the sky, YF-21 rushed into the central area of the scheduled airspace like a sharp arrow. Following behind was a group of wandering drones. They had already released all the drones named Du Luan and rushed toward YF-21. Director Garrett, I believe the purpose of this test is to verify YF-21's evasion and air combat performance. My expectation is 70% or more. Millard put his hands behind his back and watched the two sides gradually enter the scheduled firing distance on the main screen. 70%, this was a relatively merciful evaluation. However, Garrett's evaluation in his mind was far more than that. Colonel Millard, the result of this battle is 100%. Is that so? That's good. It's never a bad thing to have confidence. Millard smiled slightly and waved his right hand. The Du Luan drone group that entered the firing distance immediately released all the missiles they carried. In an instant, even VF-11, who was in the rear and performing the tracking mission, could see the terrifying number of missiles sweeping across the sky and drawing colorful trails. These colorful trajectories were not for the sake of looking good, but for the sake of capturing the YF-21's movement trajectory in the background made of colorful trajectories when the YF-21 used its high maneuverability to evade the missile. A new high-maneuver missile. What a big battle! This was the first time Ray Minkai faced such a lively battle. Even in the battle with the Beta when he first arrived at Star City, there was no lively scene of him facing hundreds of missiles alone. Despite this, Ray Minkai did not have a trace of fear. Because the trajectories of these terrifyingly large numbers of missiles had long been captured by YF-21's onboard system and reflected in Ray Minkai's mind through the BDI system. Now, perhaps using an exaggerated method, Ray Minkai's mind was a scene of the future. I see it. Ray Minkai's brain moved. The wings of the YF-21 folded downwards, and it accelerated into the sea of missiles in a head-on manner. His reckless approach set off a wave of exclamations in the command center. I see it. I see it. Now, Ray Minkai's mind was filled with the calculated trajectories of his movements. As long as YF-21 maneuvered to avoid the missiles according to the trajectory, there was no possibility of YF-21 being hit by these missiles. Now, YF-21's speed was getting faster and faster, and it was not affected by the oncoming missiles at all. It was so agile that it was as if the missiles did not exist in the first place. In just 5 seconds, YF-21 rushed out of the sea of missiles without any damage. The missiles were like headless flies, scurrying around in the airspace behind YF-21. Chapter 510. The perfect 100% dodge made Millard show a satisfied smile. However, this didn't mean that the test would end here. Director Garrett, there are still 20 Durandrones in that airspace. They are equipped with laser cannons. Are you interested in testing the actual combat performance? Millard crossed his arms in front of his chest. His glasses refracted the main screen, making it impossible to see his glasses clearly. Garrett smiled slightly and didn't reject Millard's suggestion. In the dodging performance test, just now, Ray Minkai could obviously display the performance of the YF-21. Therefore, he nodded confidently and replied, "No problem. However, I hope that the laser cannons on the Duran drones can attack in actual combat mode." As soon as Garrett said this, the people next to him raised their eyebrows. Although the YF-21 was equipped with a pinpoint defense system, facing the attack of 20 Duran drones, it would probably be difficult to resist, right? Interesting. Then, after notifying Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai, the countdown will start from 3. Understood. Ray Minkai had already heard the movements of the command center. He didn't have any opinions about this, because he also wanted to see the actual combat performance of this YF-21. Omega-1. Please answer. This is Omega-1. Ready at any time. While Ray Minkai was talking to the command center, the Duran drones that were hovering near the YF-21 had all gathered at the 6:00 direction of the YF-21. This position was the most fatal weakness in aerial combat. Whether it was a new or old pilot, as long as the enemy bit him to death at the 6:00 direction, his fate was undoubtedly equivalent to stepping into the gates of hell. He could either struggle or use all his life experience and knowledge to fight for a glimmer of life and reverse the fate of certain death. The 20 Durans were respectively in small groups of 2 or 3 behind the YF-21, waiting for the final order to be issued. Omega-1, ready. The countdown starts from 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1, attack. As soon as the command center issued the attack order, the Duran drones that had already launched their laser cannons and locked onto the YF-21 immediately fired out bursts of rainstorm-like laser beams. However, the YF-21 that was locked onto by them only lowered its fuselage, then abruptly pulled up its nose, and with another acceleration, it was able to escape from the attack axis of the Duran UAVs. As the YF-21 rapidly ascended, a cone-shaped cloud appeared in front of the YF-21 and submerged the YF-21 in the blink of an eye. However, the moment the cloud submerged YF-21, a pair of strong and powerful steel hands pulled the cloud from the inside out, revealing the YF-21 that had transformed from a highly mobile fighter into a humanoid form. In the gradually dissipating clouds, YF-21, who had transformed into a human form, flipped in the air and dodged a Duran drone that was biting him at 6:00. The moment YF-21 brushed past the drone, he immediately launched an attack. In the frenzied roar of the attack, the Duran drones that were rigidly biting YF-21 according to the program were like moths to a flame. They constantly rushed into the attack range of YF-21. Even if a considerable number of Duran drones could discover the intention of YF-21 in the first place, and with the help of the program, they could make an emergency retreat in time. The next moment, they would once again bite YF-21 in the 6:00 direction, but it was still useless. The glass mask of the helmet continued to reflect the light of the Duran drones being hit and exploding. Under the control of Ray Minkai, YF-21 easily and accurately destroyed the Duran drones. From a distance, YF-21 seemed to have become the weaver of a death feast, wantonly scattering the light that represented death in this airspace. Fortunately, YF-21's opponents were just drones controlled by cold programs. On the other side, Young Dyson, who had been following closely behind YF-21, finally managed to throw YF-21 to the back of his mind. After getting rid of the simulated missile that was targeting his VF-11, he finally arrived at the airspace where YF-21 and the Duran UAV were fighting. Damn it! There's only one propulsion engine left. This is troublesome. History was repeating itself once again. Even though Ray Minkai was not sitting in YF-21 right now, Young Dyson, who was not to be outdone, still came to this combat airspace with the help of the only rocket propulsion engine left. Yong? The moment VF-11 came here with a long trail of black smoke, Ray Minkai noticed its existence. Sorry, I'm not Garrett. Ray Minkai, who knew what Yong Dyson was going to do next, did not choose to destroy the last Duran drone and end this test. Instead, with a thought, YF-21 changed from its human form back to its high-mobility fighter form. In one breath, it rushed into the sky at a 90-degree angle. The Duran drones, which had lost their target, followed YF-21 the second after it rushed into the sky. YF-21 and the Duran drones, one after another, forgot about VF-11 that had just arrived in this airspace and ignored its existence. Damn it! Can't I catch up? Yong Dyson unwillingly abandoned the last rocket propulsion engine in the midst of the ear-piercing alarm. He wanted to let the rocket propulsion engine that was about to explode affect the aircraft's flight posture. Oh? I can't catch up. In less than 10 seconds, YF-21 rushed into the clouds. As the BDI system switched views, Lei Minkai saw that the only thing that appeared below YF-21 was the lone Duran UAV. The VF-11 piloted by Brave Dyson was nowhere to be seen. Then, it's time to end this. J-turn. The nose of the YF-21 that rushed into the clouds turned. In the blink of an eye, it had completed the maneuver from nose up to nose down. Then, the YF-21 was in a straight line with the Duran UAV that was rushing up from below. At this moment, whether it was YF-21's laser cannons, machine cannons, or the laser cannons of the Duran drone, they had all locked onto their opponent. Then, the attacks of both sides lit up the airspace. Whether it was from top to bottom or from bottom to top, the laser beams were constantly intertwined. It was slow to say, but quick to act. YF-21, which was flying straight down from the sky, was getting faster and faster. It was so fast that the aiming program of the Duran drone could not complete the various parameter adjustments in a short period of time. As the black shadow flashed, the Duran drone that could only shoot out seemingly fierce laser beams in vain, but could not hit YF-21, suddenly exploded. All that was left was YF-21, which had plunged into the clouds. Omega-1, calling control tower. Duran drone destroyed, mission completed. Control tower, Roger. Omega-1, thank you for your hard work. Now you can return. Roger. Omega-1, returning now. Yong Dyson was behind YF-21, which was heading back to the new Edward Flight Test Center. Although the VF-11 was a good body, when faced with the terrifying performance of the latest body, YF-21, it was already struggling. Not to mention the actual combat situation, it was difficult to even catch up to YF-21. When will my new mech arrive? I've seen enough of that arrogant boy's face. Unfortunately, there were still about 5 days before YF-19 returned to the factory for maintenance. In these 5 days, Yong Dyson was probably still following YF-21 and fiddling with the camera. YF-21, who completed the test mission, was welcomed by the entire YF-21 team. Moreover, Garrett, who returned to the hangar, also nodded at Ray Minkai. Second Lieutenant Ray Minkai. Colonel Millard is very satisfied with YF-21 and your performance. We are already one step ahead of the plan. I hope you can keep it up in the future. Understood. But we can't take it lightly. After all, his body hasn't been delivered yet. Ray Minkai calmly glanced at VF-11, which landed on runway 2, and said meaningfully. The corner of Garrett's mouth moved, but he couldn't say anything. Garrett not only learned about Yong Dyson's flight skills from Ray Minkai, but he also learned more detailed information from the background system. If it weren't for the fact that the current YF-21 test pilot was Ray Minkai, Garrett would probably repeat his original fate. By the way, Director Garrett, I have a request. I wonder if you can help me? Ray Minkai's sudden request made Garrett stunned, but he still nodded and agreed. When the two moons, one big and one small, around Eden rose into the sky, the Atlantis Stadium, which was about to host Sharon Epps' concert tour, was still busy. As the performance time approached, everyone's nerves became more and more tense. "It's really busy, Mr. Matthew." In the VIP room of the stadium, Matthew, who was in charge of developing Sharon Epp, personally welcomed the arrival of two distinguished guests. Moreover, other than Matthew and a few of his confidants, no one else knew that there would be two distinguished guests at the Atlantis Stadium. Even Mewing Fong Long, Sharpa Epp's emotional provider, didn't know. Yes, after all, the concert is about to begin, Miss E. Matthew smiled slightly and looked back at the concert frame that had been set up below. "Speaking of concerts, have you ever held one before, Mia?" Sitting on the sofa, the woman in a red gauze dress smiled slightly and looked at the girl with long pink hair next to her. "Well, yes. That was a long time ago." What Matthew didn't expect was that the voice of the pink girl turned out to be a heavenly voice. Almost instantly, Matthew confirmed the fact that the pink girl had held a concert before. Although he had never seen such a girl with such a heavenly voice in the Earth Circle, or even in the various colonial planets, among the colonial ships. "Miss E. You really make me feel sorry. If we could have met earlier, maybe Sharon's evolution would have gone further." Matthew sighed, and his probing gaze was unabashedly on the pink girl. "Oh? Is that so? It seems that Mr. Matthew has taken a fancy to Mia's voice, but unfortunately, Mia won't be able to show her talent on this stage. So, I can only apologize to Mr. Matthew." No, Miss E. You don't have to. To be honest, what you have provided me is indeed beyond my imagination." In the face of Miss E's apology, Matthew waved his hand again, and then changed the topic to the deal between the two sides. "Is that so? It seems that Mr. Matthew is very satisfied with the deal between us. Then I am relieved." Miss E smiled slightly. "Yes. If it weren't for Miss, I couldn't imagine that there was anything in the world that could replace the biochip. Thanks to you, Sharon Epps' evolution speed has exceeded my expectations." Facing Miss E, who had made a deal with him, Matthew gradually removed the mask of a rigorous researcher on his face and revealed his true face. "Everything is going well. However, I hope that there will be no accidents during the operation." Matthew suddenly frowned when he heard Miss E's words. "Miss E. In the previous trial run, there were some accidents." Miss E and the pink girl sitting next to her looked at each other, and the pink girl who had been silent asked again. "Mr. Matthew, can you describe the accident you found?" Matthew pondered for a moment and tried his best to describe the accident that happened before. "When I installed the chip, Note 1, given to me by Miss E on Sharon Epps' host computer, I suddenly found a data disorder and the system could not function normally." "How long did it last?" the pink girl asked again. "About half an hour. Strangely enough, while we were still confused, the system that had fallen into chaos suddenly returned to normal and began to operate stably again." Matthew's answer made Miss E and the pink girl look at each other again. "Don't worry, Mr. Matthew. This is Sharon Epp adapting to our chip. Now, isn't her growing speed of evolution also proof of this?" There were still a lot of doubts in his heart, but in the face of Sharon Epps' accelerated evolution, Matthew suppressed the doubts in his heart. After all, by accepting Miss E's kindness, Matthew didn't have to take the risk of making a deal with a certain black hand behind the scenes. Yes, Sharon Epps' evolution speed has indeed accelerated a lot. After completing the next concert, Sharon Epp will inevitably evolve to a new height. At that time, please allow me to express my most sincere gratitude to our two distinguished guests. "No need for that, Mr. Matthew. As long as you can transfer Sharon Epps' emotional data to us at that time, it will be fine. This is our deal." Matthew's promise didn't make Miss Ian Mia happy. On the contrary, they clearly understood what they needed. Of course. But other than that, I will still express my most sincere gratitude to our two distinguished guests. On the day that Sharon Ep finished, Matthew raised his right hand and placed it on his heart. He gave a most solemn bow to Miss Ian Mia while saying sincerely, "You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories."